Chapter 481, 18 Xian Cultivators. Lin Feng was proudly leaving the holy courtyard of Shuiyu without any obstruction. Everyone at the holy courtyard of Shuiyu was staring at Lin Feng's back. They felt responsible for allowing Lin Feng to humiliate them. On top of that, he had even killed their teacher. Besides, Lin Feng had ignored the others on purpose. If Lin Feng wished, he could have killed all of them, even those cultivators who were floating in the sky. Lin Feng hadn't killed Duan Tianlang because he wanted him to see everything with his own eyes, the resurrection of the Yunhai sect and the destruction of the holy courtyard of Shuiyu. In the middle of the night, a ferocious beast and a cultivator were flying through the sky above the imperial city. The ferocious beast's fur was bright red and it looked majestic. Lin Feng was sitting on the back of the winged tiger and his eyes were closed, when he suddenly opened his eyes which contained a cold look. Lin Feng wasn't the only one who sensed something. The winged tiger roared and stopped in the air. It then glanced around. A group of pitch-black silhouettes slowly appeared in Lin Feng and the winged tiger's fields of vision. Those people were all flying in the sky. They had approached silently. They were all cultivators of the Xian Qi layer. They arrived in front of Lin Feng and stopped. They didn't encircle Lin Feng but a dazzling blade light twinkled under the moonlight. That sword looked extremely cold. How cold? At that moment, the atmosphere was so oppressive that it would make people's soul shake. 18 cultivators of the Xian Qi layer. Lin Feng glanced around and counted them. There were 18 cultivators and they were all holding blades. They clearly considered Lin Feng to be a great threat. "Who are you?" asked Lin Feng. Even though he didn't expect them to reply, he still asked. He was wondering what social status those people had. He had offended many people but there weren't many people who could send such a powerful group for him. The Wanshou sect or the Yu clan could send out 18 cultivators of the Xian Qi layer but each of these people were blade cultivators. So they couldn't have been sent by the Wanshou sect or the Yu clan. They didn't have that many blade cultivators. Maybe a few great spheres of influence had prepared this group by combining their power. Besides, there was also Tian Feng. An entire country could, of course, easily send such a group of people. However, how could the Tian Feng country send so many cultivators over to Shuiyu without notice? Especially sending them into the imperial city to kill Lin Feng. The government of Shuiyu wasn't stupid. They would have noticed them and intercepted the foreign cultivators. Feng Chen wasn't foolish. He already had the opportunity to kill Lin Feng, but Ruolan Shan was clearly opposed to Lin Feng being harmed. If Feng Chen wanted to kill Lin Feng, he wasn't able to do it so openly. Lin Feng was wondering who those people were and who had the power to send 18 cultivators of the Xian Qi layer. "We're people who want to kill you," said one of them coldly. Then, the 18 cultivators each took out their blades in almost perfect synchronization which created a clear and melodious sound. Those blades were so bright with blade qi that Lin Feng had to narrow his eyes. When Lin Feng narrowed his eyes, those blades flickered and rushed forwards. Blades were moving towards Lin Feng from both his sides and from the front. Each of those blades wanted to take his life. Wind. Lin Feng started to drift freely in the wind. He was extremely agile and unbelievably fast. The sharp blades streaked across the sky creating a breathtaking scene. Lin Feng could only narrow his eyes because the lights from the blades were too dazzling. Those people were not even attempting to kill the winged tiger, they were solely targeting Lin Feng. At that moment, the blades were surrounding him. Those people had encircled him with only one movement. A subtle sound spread in the air. Lin Feng's body shook and a sword appeared in his hand as his sword energy invaded the atmosphere. But he immediately felt a sense of danger around him. He felt like he wouldn't get a chance to use his full strength to fight. Lin Feng jumped away from the winged tiger and flew into the air. His sword light followed the winds and shot forwards, causing the incoming enemies to retreat. But others who attacked from other directions continued their attacks. Their twinkling blades rushed towards Lin Feng. An extremely sharp blade energy filled the air and lacerated the atmosphere. Boom! Lin Feng's sword energy collided with the incoming blade energy. The shockwave which resulted from the collision tore through the atmosphere. An incredibly strong wind blasted in every direction. Lin Feng was stupefied. Those people were all using blades and they were working together, in formation. They were in perfect harmony with each other and it was extremely difficult to find a weak point in their formation. At that moment, above and behind Lin Feng, there were only blades which were diffusing a sharp qi towards Lin Feng's body. It seemed like they were not going to give Lin Feng a single second of rest. A terrifying, deadly energy emerged from Lin Feng's body and burst into the sky. His eyes grew black and emotionless. No matter who those people were, he would kill them. Roar! Lin Feng released his terrifying purple spirit, and a purple lake filled the atmosphere. His extremely strong soul then emerged from his body and merged with the purple spirit which then started to rapidly transform. Ha! Those 18 cultivators were surprised when they saw the purple lake because it wasn't attacking them or even surrounding them, it seemed to be spinning and spreading across sky. It invaded the entire atmosphere which gradually became darker as the purple spirit appeared to block all of the light from the starry sky. Boom! The sound of a collision emerged in the air. Lin Feng used the force of their attack to propel his body backwards, but they immediately gave chase. Suddenly, the purple lake fell from the sky and submerged them along with Lin Feng. It surrounded them and they were no longer able to see Lin Feng. If they hastily retreated, it would give Lin Feng an opportunity to attack them out of formation. How did we end up being surrounded? Asked one of them. They all glanced at the others. There were 18 of them and all of them had been trapped by the purple spirit. Let's attack together, said one of them. That purple spirit was a threat to them, it had trapped them inside and seemed to be restraining their movements. Suddenly, they no longer had any sense of direction or time, it looked like they were submerged inside a purple world. When they tried to think clearly, they found out that they couldn't see any of their colleagues anymore. They seemed to be entirely alone. One of them noticed that he was trapped inside, he was imprisoned. 9 Palace Dragon Formation. Everybody frowned. They, of course, recognized that palace, it was an illusion but it wasn't used to kill people, it was used to imprison people. Lin Feng was standing outside of the illusion and watching as a cold light flashed through his eyes. He took a step and immediately appeared in front of one of them inside the illusion which stupefied the man. At that moment, he was directly opposite Lin Feng. "Tell me who you people are," said Lin Feng coldly. The man's eyes twinkled, but he remained silent. "If you don't want to talk, then die," said Lin Feng, moving like the wind towards the man. In a flash, he appeared in front of his opponent and attacked with his deadly sword, but the man brandished his dazzling blade in return. However, the assassin was alone. Could he stop Lin Feng's sword? His blade was absorbed into Lin Feng's deadly energy which terrified him. Immediately after, his body was split into 2 by Lin Feng's sword. Lin Feng didn't even turn to look at him. He took another step and arrived in another purple room. There was a female assassin in that room who was shocked and looked pale. "Who sent you to kill me?" asked Lin Feng again. She stared at Lin Feng and replied in an ice-cold tone, "Lin Feng, I never would have believed that you'd be able to create the 9 Palace Dragon Formation. You're lucky, but that won't save you next time. Even if there's a next time, you won't be alive to see it," said Lin Feng while running forwards and attacking with his deadly sword. In a flash, she was dead as well. Lin Feng continued killing those people inside the illusion. All those cultivators of the Xian Qi layer were dying one by one inside Lin Feng's illusion. After killing those 18 people, the illusion disappeared, and Lin Feng was standing in the lonely night sky. He looked like a death god, but he didn't seem proud or arrogant. He already had an extremely high social status, he was Yu Menghe's son and part of Duan Wuya's faction. Ruolan Shan had also showed a liking to him, but some foolish people still dared to try and assassinate him. Besides, the 18 were all trained in a particular formation, so those people probably belonged to a very influential group. The scariest part was that none of the 18 had revealed the name of whom they worked, even when threatened with death. That type of enemy was extremely terrifying, and that group must be extremely powerful. Chapter 482, Thousands of Arrows. A large number of people followed the Dragon Mountain Empire from Tianfeng and traveled to Shuiyu. During the banquet, Lin Feng humiliated the 7 envoys of Tianfeng one after the other and even killed 2 of them. During the night after the banquet, 18 cultivators of the Xian Qi layer had appeared and had tried to kill Lin Feng with a blade formation, but in the end, they had completely failed. Lin Feng's battle ability was made clear at Xiangjiang Lake. It seemed like something big was going to happen in Shuiyu. People couldn't really describe it, but they knew that something important was going to happen and nobody could predict the aftermath. Outside of the imperial city, thousands of kilometers away, something astonishing was happening as well. A certain location was in complete ruins, but the news hasn't spread to the imperial city. The strongest sect of the country, the Haoyu sect, had been completely destroyed. On that day, 10,000 of Qi Xia armored cavalry had entered the territory of the Haoyu sect and annihilated everything in their path. Blood flowed like a river. The entire sect had been destroyed and the Haoyu sect would vanish into history. Apart from some people who were outside and a few who had managed to escape, everybody was killed without mercy. The entire sect had become a river of blood. The massacre had lasted for an entire day. At dusk, black crows and ferocious hawks were flying around above the territory of the Haoyu sect and sometimes swooping down to eat the dead flesh from the countless bodies. It looked apocalyptic and desolate. The setting sun reflected on the surface of the blood river, giving off an eerie feel. At that moment, the troops who destroyed the sect were already on their way to their next location. In the mountain chain where the Haoyu sect was, there was a group of people who gathered around to see the aftermath of the attack. Looking at the piles of corpses and river of blood, they felt a chill down in their soul. This was the world of cultivation, it was cruel and sanguinary. They, of course, knew who those troops were. The Qi Xia troops belonged to Officer Lin Feng from Yangzhou City. Besides, Lin Feng also used to be a disciple of the Yunhai sect. In the past, the Haoyu sect had participated in the extermination of the Yunhai sect. It had been, just like Haoyu sect was at that moment, a bloodbath. Lin Feng had started taking his revenge. In the past, he was only a very talented disciple from the Yunhai sect, but at that moment, he was already a famous genius in Shuiyu. He, of course, wanted to get his revenge. He hated those who destroyed his sect. The Haoyu sect wasn't going to be the last sect on his list though, it was only the beginning. Actually, the Haoyu sect wasn't even a start, the revenge had only just begun. Thousands of kilometers away from the Haoyu sect, there was the Yunhai mountain chain. Everybody in the mountain chain was in a state of full alert. Every possible exit was blocked, except for the one leading to the Black Wind Mountain. Every other entrance and exit was blocked. The Qi Xia troops had already been there for 7 days. During those 7 days, no one was able to enter or exit. Only people who were from the surroundings of the Yunhai mountain chain were allowed to leave. It had been evacuated of all bystanders almost instantly. If they had stayed, they would have died. Who would have dared to stay? Those Qi Xia troops had come to avenge the Yunhai sect. If anyone dared infuriate them, they would be courting death. Around the mountain chain, the Qi Xia troops were calmly waiting. They looked cold and remained in perfect formation while being absolutely silent. Some people, even though they had already left the mountain chain, hadn't left the surrounding area, they were just standing in the distance and observing what was going to happen. They wanted to see if the Qi Xia troops would really go on a rampage. At that moment, on the peaks of the Yunhai mountain chain, everybody was terrified. They were frightened beyond belief. They had already been encircled for 7 days and they didn't know what was going to happen, they might all be slaughtered. Everybody feared death, some people were more scared than others, but in the end, when facing death, everybody would be scared. Not being scared of death was impossible, it was a natural instinct. Besides, they couldn't leave, so they could only wait for death. The wait was driving them insane and many had already lost all hope. The people who remained were people from the Haoyu sect, the Ice and Snow Mountain Village, the Wanshou sect and the Holy Courtyard of Shuiyu. They had divided the entire Yunhai mountain and established military bases there. The Black Wind Mountain, a good hunting ground which was extremely attractive to the sects, they were all delighted to have access to it. But at that moment, the Yunhai mountain looked and felt like a mountain of doom. They wanted to leave but they couldn't. Suddenly the situation became chaotic. Everyone tried to run away, they wanted to escape immediately, but the cavalry had started galloping towards them in perfect formation. The armored cavalry had finally started to move after encircling them for 7 days. Were they going to attack? Everybody wanted to escape, but because of the Qi Xia cavalry, they were all being forced into the same direction. They were being pushed to the center of a valley by the horses. The troops were forcing them all to gather in the same location. In the center of that valley, the people started to pour in by the thousands. They were looking to their right and left only to see more people pouring in from every direction. They were all growing more scared when they noticed this. They knew that those troops were probably going to kill them. But what could they do? They were surrounded by a powerful army and were clearly outmatched. They had no choice. In the end, a huge group of people gathered in the middle of the valley. When they looked up to the cliffs of the valley, they could see the Qi Xia troops looking down on them. They all looked cold and detached and were releasing some deadly qi as they all reached for their bows. Many people's hearts were pounding violently. This scene was similar to what happened in the past. Back then, Duan Tianlang had come to the Yunhai sect with the other sects and had slaughtered the Yunhai sect. History was repeating itself. However, in the valley, there weren't any people from the Yunhai sect. The scene looked the same but the positions had been reversed. Only those who annihilated the Yunhai sect were forced into the valley. Nobody had ever thought that such a thing would happen. The atmosphere was deathly silent and oppressive. In the distance, a whistling sound spread through the air. Very quickly, everyone noticed two silhouettes. It was Lin Feng riding his winged tiger. His pure white clothes were fluttering in the wind as he looked down towards the valley. That beast was bright red like fire and had two gigantic wings. Everyone was terrified of the vicious beast. Everybody looked up at the silhouettes in the sky. However, what frightened people more than the winged tiger was when they recognized the person riding it. Lin Feng had come back. He had come to avenge the Yunhai sect. A few years before, he was a low-level disciple of the Yunhai sect. He had just broken through to the Ling Qi layer. Now, he was like a blazing star in the sky. He had become the Marquis of Yangzhou City, the Qi Xia Marquis, and had a powerful army under his control. He was also riding a terrifying Xian-level beast and had now returned to the Yunhai sect with a tremendous power. If the Yunhai sect still existed, Lin Feng's return would have been glorious. However, the Yunhai sect had been exterminated and all Lin Feng wanted to do was massacre those responsible. Lin Feng had returned for revenge. Lin Feng didn't continue looking down at those people. Instead, he looked towards the mountain chain. He could see all the places he remembered from the past, but only coldness filled his eyes. A debt of blood had to be paid with blood. He slowly turned his head and looked at the valley, the stormy gorge. There was an arena in the center, the life and death arena. Lin Feng could remember his time at the stormy gorge and the life and death arena. At that moment, he could clearly remember all those people who had long since died. He could remember how Lu Fei had chased him. He could remember Protector Kong who protected him along with Protector Bai's kind smile. Lin Feng looked down at the crowd in the stormy gorge. He despised all of them. Those people were like vermin in Lin Feng's eyes. He looked at them the same way they looked at the Yunhai sect in the past. Lin Feng slowly rose his hand and in a flash, countless whistling sounds spread through the air which was immediately invaded by a deadly qi. Thousands and thousands of arrows were shot into the air, aiming directly for the people inside the valley. Everyone inside the valley was panicking. They were shaking as they saw the cloud of arrows falling from the sky. They all looked terrified. In that heartless world, people would show no mercy to their enemies. Blood was the only way to repay blood. Lin Feng only raised his hand into the air and thousands upon thousands of arrows were unleashed into the air. Chapter 483, The Resurrection of the Yunhai Sect. In the air, there were countless arrows blotting out the sky. The people inside the stormy gorge raised their heads and saw an endless amount of arrows. They could only stare blankly at the incoming arrows as there was nowhere to run. SSSS. SSSSSS. The cloud of arrows grew thicker and thicker as more arrows were shot into the sky. The sight caused their bodies to shiver with fear. Ah! Followed by a sound like rain hitting a roof, countless horrible shrieks started spreading through the air. The arrows finally fell onto the people inside the valley and the sound of slaughter began. This was part of the cycle of fate, this was their karma. Besides, that was only the first wave of arrows. After the first wave, thousands of arrows were shot continuously into the air, creating a thick cloud. The arrows were endless and unceasing. It was Judgment Day for all of their sins. The atmosphere was filled with painful cries and the wails of death. Lin Feng sat on his winged tiger in the sky, looking down at the stormy gorge. He looked absolutely expressionless, he had already become accustomed to death and slaughter. Nobody could remain completely calm when seeing such a tragedy. Lin Feng was no exception, but he knew, deep in his heart, that he was doing the right thing. He had to avenge those who were slaughtered trying to protect him. If, in the future, the survivors went against him for revenge, Lin Feng would understand. This was a consequence that he would have to shoulder for the sake of his revenge. Lin Feng couldn't save everyone from suffering, all he could do was kill his enemies and move forward. After the third wave of arrows, there was no longer any signs of life within the valley. Their blood had gathered in the center of the valley to form a lake and the entire ground was dyed red. Enough! Said Lin Feng indifferently, and in a flash, the troops stopped firing their arrows. Those troops looked firm and emotionless. All those troops were professional soldiers. They all had shed an incredible amount of blood in battle. Besides, these weren't just ordinary troops, they were the Qixia troops. All of them had more blood on their hands than most armies in the land. In the past, they had seen many of their comrades die in wars. Seeing their comrades die was always a tragic experience. If they didn't fight at full power to kill all of their enemies, then one of their comrades might die as a consequence, which is why they were honed from the slaughter of their enemies. There would never be a real winner in any conflict, as one side would always suffer at the hands of the other. All they could do was to avenge their comrades and fight to stay alive. Those troops were like cold, unmoving mountains. If Lin Feng gave the order, they would immediately take action. Lin Feng had stopped them, so not a single soldier fired another arrow into the valley. "Qiong Qi, they are for you," said Lin Feng indifferently. His winged tiger then roared and threw itself into the gorge. When it arrived above the gorge, it opened its mouth and breathed out a torrent of blazing flames. Those corpses were immediately set ablaze, and the blood started to evaporate. The winged tiger's fire was extremely hot and causing the temperature to rise throughout the valley. Its gigantic wings kept beating in the air just above the gorge. It flew around and around while unleashing torrents of fire. Very quickly, the entire gorge was consumed by a raging inferno. Those terrifying flames reached such heights that the entire valley was overcome with a dancing light. In the distance, the people who looked in the direction of the Yunhai mountain could only see flames dashing towards the skies. They couldn't believe their eyes, they were all shaking as cold sweat covered their bodies. Wouldn't such a monstrous fire burn the entire mountain? Were those people on the Yunhai mountain all dead? Many people were actually relieved that they hadn't participated in the extermination of the Yunhai sect in the past, otherwise they would all be dead at that moment. They would be burning inside the gorge. Lin Feng was too tyrannical. He wanted to get his revenge, so his flames of fury set Shuiyu ablaze. After that, many people would remember those flames. They continued burning for 3 days and 3 nights. At the top of the Yunhai mountain, there was no longer any darkness. It was always illuminated by the flames which burnt the corpses of Lin Feng's enemies. Of course, that was what happened after. At that moment, the winged tiger went back to Lin Feng's side. Lin Feng was looking at the flames, he sighed and said, "The Haoyu sect is already destroyed. The Yunhai mountain is ours again. I, Lin Feng, as the patriarch of the Yunhai sect, declare that the Yunhai sect is reborn." Ah! 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 Many people were shouting, they sounded like roaring beasts. It was a shocking display. The Yunhai sect had been destroyed, many people had been sold as slaves, and those slaves had been saved by Lin Feng. All of those survivors had already become members of the Qi Xia troops. Of course, calling the Qi Xia troops an army of Shuiyu was not really correct, because the Qi Xia troops only had one leader, Lin Feng. They were no longer loyal to any country and only obeyed Lin Feng. Those former members of the Yunhai sect felt a deep and profound hatred. They had been turned into slaves and were imprisoned, but at that moment, they could finally see their sect again. They were excited. Other people would never understand the way they felt. Stay here at the Yunhai sect and cultivate for 3 days. Then in 3 days' time, head to the Ice and Snow Mountain village, said Lin Feng indifferently. The Yunhai sect was resurrected, but it wasn't as easy as that. They still had a long list of enemies. Under Lin Feng's control, their thousands and thousands of strong cultivators, it was an extremely powerful army. Lin Feng was getting prepared to carry out a full military reform. However, their purpose would remain the same, killing his enemies. Lin Feng would choose a few young people from the Qi Xia troops, those who stood out because of their natural abilities, and would let them concentrate on cultivation, in order to enhance their strength. Lin Feng wanted to build a powerful army which would be a mixture of members from the Qi Xia army and the Yunhai sect. It wouldn't be a mere army anymore. If a sect didn't have much power, it couldn't remain prosperous. That is why he would build an army for the sect. Only if the sect and the army worked together would they be able to establish a power like never before. Lin Feng and his army remained in the Yunhai mountain chain for 3 days to reorganize. Lin Feng had destroyed the Haoyu sect and brought his people to the Yunhai mountain to exterminate the invaders. That news spread very quickly across Shuiyu. Everybody was astonished. The Haoyu sect, a gigantic sect, was annihilated. The first great sect which had been destroyed was the Yunhai sect, quickly followed in the footsteps of the Luoxia sect. In Celestial River, the Luoxia sect had lost the majority of its strongest cultivators. They had all been killed by Lin Feng. Then, Duan Wudao had killed the majority of its members in the imperial city, which led to their collapse. With Haoyu sect exterminated, its annihilation had also led to the resurrection of the Yunhai sect. Lin Feng, who used to be a disciple of the Yunhai sect, had already astonished the entire country of Shuiyu. Everybody knew that he was the patriarch of the Yunhai sect. At that moment, everybody was looking at the Ice and Snow Mountain village. Lin Feng's next target would undoubtedly be the Ice and Snow Mountain village. Maybe after destroying the Ice and Snow Mountain village, Lin Feng would head to the imperial city. The people who had participated in the destruction of the Yunhai sect were numerous. They were all very influential groups spread throughout the country. Lin Feng had resurrected the Yunhai sect, but he was not done avenging it. Everybody who had participated in its destruction had to die. He was definitely planning to go to the imperial city. Many people were growing impatient. They wanted to see Lin Feng create another legend in Shuiyu. Chapter 484, Shameless Han Shui Tian. The Ice and Snow Mountain village was to the north of Shuiyu. It was constantly surrounded by snow and ice. It was one of the 4 influential powers of the country, and was the only sect that wasn't situated in a mountain chain. At that moment, there were countless deep footprints in the thick layer of snow that covered the ground. The Ice and Snow Mountain village looked like a landscape from a fairy tale, a vast expanse of whiteness. About 50 kilometers away from the Ice and Snow Mountain village, the snow had been upturned by the armored horses of Qi Xia. They were in perfect formation. There were seemingly more than 10,000 soldiers with astonishing cultivations. Such a powerful army was terrifying. That army was precisely the Qi Xia army. They first exterminated the Haoyu sect, and then Lin Feng had them march to the Ice and Snow Mountain village. Mr. Qi and the troops were waiting for Lin Feng to arrive and join them. Because they weren't stationed far away from the Ice and Snow Mountain village, they were able to keep a close watch over the sect and all of its movements. At least, they could make sure that they wouldn't try to escape and leave the Ice and Snow Mountain village abandoned. Of course, if they could see the sect from there, the sect could see them as well. They knew exactly how many troops were stationed outside. On that day, many people left the ice and snow mountain village. They were slowly walking and approaching the troops. The vast expanse of white snow looked even more incredible when seeing the people appear on the vast white landscape. When the troops saw the people heading towards them, they prepared for battle. What surprised the troops was that the people of the ice and snow mountain village hadn't stayed within their territory. Surprisingly, they had taken the initiative to come out. Of course, the people of the ice and snow mountain village thought that staying in the sect would be the same as waiting for death. The Haoyu sect had been destroyed by Lin Feng and he had then taken control of the Yunhai mountain chain again. The ice and snow mountain village already knew about these events. At that moment, the thousands of soldiers were waiting. They were obviously waiting for Lin Feng to join them. Since that was the case, if the ice and snow mountain village waited for too long, their enemies would grow more and more numerous and become increasingly powerful, so why not leave immediately and try to open an escape route by force? Mr. Qi was standing at the front of the army and looking at the people rushing towards him. There were hundreds of people rushing towards him. Each and every single one of them looked cold and detached. They were wearing white clothes and were releasing powerful some ice energy. All those people practiced using ice and snow skills. Everybody at the ice and snow mountain village practiced ice and snow skills and each of them had an ice or snow spirit. They all had the same aura, without exception. Very quickly, the members of the ice and snow mountain village had closed the distance between themselves and the army. Though they were only a few hundred, when compared with the thousands of troops, they were nothing. The one at the very front was the patriarch of the ice and snow mountain village, Han Shuatian. "Mr. Qi, I wouldn't have thought that we would meet again," said Han Shuatian with a faint smile on his face. The ice and snow mountain village wasn't very far from Celestial River, so the disciples of the mountain village would frequently visit. Han Shuatian himself also frequently visited the Celestial River often, but never made his visits public knowledge. Besides, he had already met Mr. Qi inside Celestial River. "I hadn't thought we would meet again either. But things have changed, we are now enemies," said Mr. Qi indifferently. Han Shuatian shook his head and said, "Why talk that way? You are not my enemy. Let's continue as friends. You will receive a warm welcome at my ice and snow mountain village," said Han Shuatian, trying to draw Mr. Qi over to his side. But Mr. Qi only shook his head and said, "Han Shuatian, you cannot convince me. Things have changed, we are now on different sides. You are a member of the ice and snow mountain village, I am with Lin Feng. Lin Feng is your enemy, so I am now your enemy too. This is something that cannot be changed." Han Shuatian was astonished. Mr. Qi was openly admitting that he was following Lin Feng. Mr. Qi used to be an illustrious and eminent figure in Celestial River. Han Shuatian had never thought that he would be following Lin Feng. "Since that is the case, I will not insist if you are following Lin Feng. It seems like this battle will be unavoidable. If you want to fight now, just attack. Don't waste my time," said Mr. Qi indifferently. He sounded absolutely unperturbed. "Then we will fight," said Han Shuatian while taking a step through the air which left a huge mark in the snow. In a flash, he threw himself at Mr. Qi. If the old man wanted to fight, he wouldn't waste time. The atmosphere was filled with snow. It would have been a picturesque scene, if not for the battle that was about to begin. However, Mr. Qi didn't feel like admiring the scenery. When facing the patriarch of the ice and snow mountain village, he couldn't afford to relax. A terrifying fire arose from Mr. Qi. Han Shuatian practiced ice and snow cultivation, and Mr. Qi practiced the opposite, fire cultivation. Mr. Qi didn't care about what the enemy was practicing. He took a heavy step in his opponent's direction. His entire body was covered with rampaging flames. Ice and fire collided in a stalemate, creating a unique scene in midair. Mr. Qi wanted to use his flames to melt the ice, but Han Shuatian wanted to use his ice to extinguish the flames. Those two cultivators had totally opposing cultivation styles. "Mr. Qi is, as expected, you are still extremely strong. No wonder you were such an eminent and illustrious person in Celestial River. I, Han Shui Tian, will learn a lot from you during this battle. As you wish, replied Mr. Qi. The two people then both shot into the air. The troops were watching the battle without getting involved. Even though they really wanted to join the battle, they respected a duel between experts. The two fighters were growing more and more courageous. They continued colliding in the air, over and over again. The ice and fire became even more powerful. Everyone was fixedly staring at them. Who was going to come out victorious? At that moment, a piercingly cold ice suddenly arose from the mountain village, astonishing many people. It doesn't look good. The troops were astonished. A silhouette on the side of the ice and snow mountain village rose into the air. That person's energy was monstrously powerful. World of ice and snow. Extreme icebound. At that moment, Han Shui Tian and that other person spoke at the same time. In a flash, a terrifying ice energy surrounded Mr. Qi's body. Bastards! Shouted the Qi Xia troops. They were furious. The person who had just intervened was very young. Everybody thought of one person when they saw that young man, the patriarch's son, Luo Shui. Han Shui Tian and Mr. Qi were fighting. Initially it was a duel between experts, but at that moment Luo Shui was surprisingly attacking Mr. Qi by surprise. How despicable! Get lost! Shouted Mr. Qi while attacking those two people, but the extreme icebound attack was too powerful and crashed against his body, piercing through to his bones. Mr. Qi started falling from the sky, and he felt like he was freezing from the inside. Mr. Qi, sorry for the inconvenience, said Han Shui Tian while smiling coldly. The Qi Xia troops' facial expressions were extremely sharp. Those people were extremely strong, so they wouldn't be able to capture them alive. How shameless! A voice filled the atmosphere from the distance which shocked everybody. A silhouette was rushing towards them, and that person was Lin Feng, rushing forward like the wind. The Qi Xia troops all smiled at that moment. Lin Feng had arrived. The people of the ice and snow mountain village were scared. Han Shui Tian immediately moved towards Mr. Qi again. He wanted to attack him and remove a powerful enemy. He was releasing an extremely cold ice energy. Mr. Qi was shocked. He had just been attacked and was already injured. If Han Shui Tian attacked him again, Mr. Qi wouldn't be able to survive. Piss off! Shouted Lin Feng while releasing some terrifying black deadly energy which immediately moved between Han Shui Tian and Mr. Qi. Luo Shui wanted to attack as well, but the winged tiger suddenly appeared in front of him and prevented him from moving forwards. Collision sound spread through the air. Han Shui Tian had been unable to reach Mr. Qi. Lin Feng had been too fast. Lin Feng, Mr. Qi and the winged tiger were now together, while Han Shui Tian and Luo Shui were opposite them. They were all staring at each other coldly. As expected, despicable little people. This makes things easier, said Lin Feng in an ice-cold tone, and then added, Qi Xia troops, attack. Leave none alive. Charge into the ice and snow mountain village and exterminate every living thing. Not a single soul should remain alive. Lin Feng's voice was ice-cold, to the extent that the freezing atmosphere seemed like it had dropped by several degrees. He wanted to completely annihilate the ice and snow mountain village. Chapter 485, Red Snow. Let's attack together and kill them all. Han Shui Tian and Mr. Qi were fighting, but Luo Shui launched a surprise attack against Mr. Qi, but they had an army of over 10,000 supporting them. Why would they be scared? The people from the ice and snow mountain village were all terrified. Mr. Qi hadn't died because Lin Feng had protected him. Their plan had failed, and now they had to face an army of furious Qi Xia troops. A rumbling sound spread through the air, and the Qi Xia troops all released their deadly energy, which caused the ground shake. The members of the ice and snow mountain village were suddenly terrified and their faces filled with panic. Mr. Qi, go and have a rest. I can take care of those too. Mr. Qi took a pill and started to recover. Mr. Qi was an alchemist. if treated in time, his injuries wouldn't be of any danger to him. "All right," said Mr. Qi. He didn't insist on helping Lin Feng. With Lin Feng's strength, he could easily cope with those two cultivators of the fourth Xian Qi layer. Mr. Qi moved back and Lin Feng released his deadly energy, which also contained strands of intent. Han Shui Tian and Luo Shui were surrounded by deadly energy which caused them to tremble. They quickly released some ice qi in the form of snowflakes which filled the atmosphere and held off the deadly energy. However, those snowflakes grew chaotic as the deadly energy started to overcome them. "Die!" Lin Feng took a step forwards and in a flash arrived in front of Luo Shui. He then brandished a deadly sword straight towards his opponent. "Ice and snow!" shouted Luo Shui abruptly. Then, a stream of snowflakes condensed on Lin Feng's deadly sword and froze it in place. "World of ice and snow!" shouted Han Shui Tian at that moment while releasing a terrifyingly powerful ice energy. The entire atmosphere seemed like it had frozen solid. Extremely strong skills could alter vast landscapes, it wasn't a myth. Lin Feng's deadly energy could change the atmosphere into an air of death, ice and snow could freeze the atmosphere, etc. At that moment, even the sun couldn't make that ice melt. Besides, as the atmosphere became colder and colder, the people from the ice and snow mountain village would grow stronger and stronger because they used ice and snow skills. If the atmosphere was frozen, they were much stronger and thus more courageous. However, it was the opposite for their opponents. As the atmosphere became colder, the enemies of the ice and snow mountain village became weaker and were influenced by the drastic cold. Therefore, as those ice cultivators' strength increased, they also had more endurance to fight. Fighting against them became much more dangerous. However, Lin Feng didn't intend to fight against them for a long time, that wasn't necessary. His deadly qi crashed through the atmosphere and swallowed the ice and snow. A black sword appeared and a terrifying deadly qi shot into the skies. At that moment, his deadly energy contained sword intent. Even though his sword intent was only at the first level, it was more than enough. "Die!" shouted Lin Feng furiously. A black light flashed and disappeared in an instant. Psh! A subtle sound spread in the air. Han Shui Tian, who was attacking Lin Feng, was still in the air, but he wasn't moving forwards anymore. He lowered his head and saw that his waist was bleeding. The lower part of his body was gradually detaching itself from the upper half of his body. "Ah!" A horrible shriek filled the air and resonated across the battlefield. Everyone from the ice and snow mountain village looked up and saw that the patriarch, Han Shui Tian's body had been cut into two. His eyes were still wide open but his body was no longer whole. The people from the village felt their hearts start pounding violently, but they quickly forgot about all of that, because their bodies were then sliced apart. The Qi Xia army did not look up and get distracted during battle and continued their attacks. Escape! The members from the village had only one thought at that moment: they wanted to escape. Their patriarch had been killed by Lin Feng and sliced in half. Was fighting against the Qi Xia troops still worth it? Everyone from the ice and snow mountain village started trying to escape, including the elders and the geniuses from the sect. Nobody wanted to die. Dying with their comrades was a virtuous thing, but most of the time, when confronted with death, most people wanted to escape because they were terrified of death. This couldn't be blamed, as it was a natural reaction to cling on to life. Could they escape though? At the moment when they started to escape, thousands of arrows streaked across the sky. It seemed like there was an ocean of arrows crashing down from above. Considering the number of arrows, those who were running away were just moving target practice for the thousands of troops. When Luo Shui saw that Han Shui Tian was dead, and that everybody wanted to escape, his eyes became crimson, but he released no deadly energy. Lin Feng was too terrifying. Luo Shui couldn't fight against him. Luo Shui's hands floated in the wind and an extremely cold air stream moved towards Lin Feng, bombarding its way through the atmosphere. However, at the same time, a huge snowflake appeared under his feet and just like a flying carpet, it swept him into the distance. He wanted to escape too. He didn't try to save the ice and snow mountain village anymore. It was already fated to be destroyed. When Lin Feng saw that Luo Shui wanted to escape, he smiled coldly. Luo Shui had broken through to the fourth Xian Qi layer and was trying to escape when facing Lin Feng. Who said he could leave? Wind. Lin Feng's silhouette flickered, he sensed the wind and rushed through the sky. He was extremely agile. It seemed like he had transformed into a gust of wind. There was absolutely no resistance slowing him as he moved through the air. He then threw himself towards Luo Shui like a hurricane. A terrifying deadly energy crashed into Luo Shui's body which made him shake from head to toe. He turned his head and only saw Lin Feng's body behind him, raising a black sword. Lin Feng's sword descended and Luo Shui's body was split down the middle. He had rushed here from the Imperial City and now wanted to rush back, but only death awaited him. Maybe he started to regret everything just before dying. But he had always known how terrifying Lin Feng was. Why did he come back when he knew what was coming? Did he think that he would be able to save the ice and snow mountain village with such little power? He had already understood, when Lin Feng had started to rampage across Xueyu, that nobody would be able to save his sect. The destruction of the ice and snow mountain village seemed inevitable. At that moment, it was too late for him to regret anything, he was already dead. Lin Feng looked at Luo Shui's body as it fell from the air. He looked emotionless. He didn't seem to realize that two of the incredible and majestic 8 high officials of Xueyu had died to his hands. The 6th and the 7th high officials had died in his hands, Chu Zhanpeng and Luo Shui. Lin Feng then looked at his troops on the ground. How could a few hundred people fight against his army of over 10,000? They were making quick work of the cultivators and were completely destroying the sect. On the ground, one of his soldiers was particularly strong. A blade was twinkling around him, he looked like a warlord bathed in blood. He looked like a violent death god. Nobody could stop him. His blade made from pure qi was unstoppable. Ba Dao, he used to be the strongest of the slaves, thought Lin Feng. He remembered when he was in prison, nobody could control him. He was monstrously violent. Lin Feng had liberated him, thanks to the auction sales. Back then, Ba Dao's cultivation level was higher than his own and he was able to control blade force. At that moment, Lin Feng had already broken through to the 3rd Xian Qi layer whereas Ba Dao had only broken through to the 1st Xian Qi layer. With his incredible blade, his blade spirit, and his comprehension of energy attacks, Ba Dao could easily defeat people of the 2nd Xian Qi layer. On Lin Feng's side, there were quite a few outstanding cultivators. Some of them were not any less talented than him and some had the same cultivation, it was just that they weren't as lucky as him to have an advanced power of understanding. Duan Feng had devoted his life to cultivation, Ba Dao was monstrously violent and brutal, Han Man was a simple man but he incredible natural abilities and a very strong blood spirit, then there was Pajun who had a dual spirit. If Lin Feng hadn't met all of these people, maybe he wouldn't have been able to rise as quickly as he did. These rare talents were always in Lin Feng's shadow, but they wanted to follow Lin Feng. When Lin Feng thought about those things, he looked up at the sky, in the direction of Duanren City. He was wondering what Uncle Lu, Fei Fei, Han Man and Pajun were doing. The last time he had seen Uncle Lu in the Imperial City, he had lost hope. After finishing what he had to do, Lin Feng would try and return to Duanren City. The Ice and Snow Mountain Village was the last battle before the Imperial City. Lin Feng had already killed all his enemies outside of the city, his other enemies were all waiting inside the Imperial City. When the sun was setting, the Qi Xia troops were galloping through the snow towards the Imperial City. In the distance, Lin Feng looked in the direction of the Ice and Snow Mountain Village and could see that the white landscape was now filled with red snow. Chapter 486, To the Imperial City. Outside of the Imperial City, in Qing Xian's restaurant, many people had gathered to drink alcohol and gossip about the events that happened across Xueyu. Kai Tai, have you heard about happened in the Ice and Snow Mountain Village? Asked a middle-aged man with a black mole on his face. He was clearly drunk when speaking to the man who looked like a scholar. In the Ice and Snow Mountain Village? What happened? Asked Kai Tai curiously. Could something big have happened there? Hee, Kai Tai, you have become ignorant as of late. Don't you know about the latest news of Shueyu? Said the middle-aged man while laughing mockingly. Humph. I know what is going on in our country. Marquis Lin Feng brought his Qi Xia troops to the Yunhai mountain chain and revived the Yunhai sect with a bloodbath. At the same time, he destroyed the Haoyu sect. Everybody is talking about those things, who doesn't know about it? Asked Kai Tai, seemingly upset. The Haoyu sect had been destroyed and Lin Feng had taken control of the Yunhai mountain chain and revived the Yunhai sect. Everybody in Shueyu was astonished by these events, but that news could be heard everywhere in the country. Hee, everybody knows about those things, that is old news already. However, you don't seem to know what happened in the ice and snow mountain village. Said the middle-aged man with the black mole indifferently. Kai Tai was speechless. What? The ice and snow mountain village is still very powerful, could it be that Lin Feng exterminated it as well? The ice and snow mountain village isn't like the Haoyu sect. The Haoyu sect had already lost its patriarch Chu Qing during the genius competition of Shueyu, as well as Chu Zhanpeng. Lin Feng had killed them both. Thus, the Haoyu sect had already lost its leaders. However, the ice and snow mountain village still had its patriarch, Han Shuetian. He was extremely powerful and could stand as a powerful defense against enemies. Besides, after Luo Xue had learnt of the events in Shueyu, he had rushed over to the ice and snow mountain village. Due to the dangerous situation, all its members had gathered to defend the sect. Don't tell me they have been annihilated as well. Extremely powerful? Have you forgotten how Chu Zhanpeng and Chu Qing died? When facing a much stronger opponent, even if all the members of the ice and snow mountain village gathered to defend it, they still couldn't do anything when fighting against tens of thousands of the Qi Xia troops. The large army trampled their way through the territory of the sect. The ice and snow is now dyed scarlet red, tainted with blood. Now, Lin Feng can truly be considered as a peerless cultivator of Shueyu. Wherever he goes, nothing can stop him, he annihilates his enemies with utmost precision. Nobody can stop him from getting his revenge. I fear that he will soon be at the doors of the imperial city. Said the middle-aged man sounding excited. He was telling the story as if he was secretly Lin Feng, the hero of the story. He had been drinking all day thinking of the best way to share his tale. Lin Feng had become like the sun at high noon. He was at the apex of his power. He had started from nothing and by only relying on his own strength, he had exterminated countless heroes of Shueyu. Step by step, he achieved greatness and became the hero of the country. He will come to the imperial city. Kai Tai shook his head and said, impossible. Even though he destroyed the ice and snow mountain village, it doesn't mean that he will come to the imperial city. You cannot behave so wildly in the imperial city. If he comes, what would he do anyway? Go to the holy courtyard of Shueyu and the Wanshou sect? The holy courtyard of Shueyu contained Shueyu in its name and Duan Tianlang, a member of the Duan clan was its principal. Besides, the Wanshou sect was one of the most powerful groups in Shueyu. Those groups were much more powerful than the Haoyu sect and the ice and snow mountain village combined. Besides, the Wanshou sect had Wu Qing, who was the third high official of the country. Lin Feng was very strong, but destroying the Wanshou sect seemed like an impossible feat. He will. Just wait and see. Said the middle-aged man sounding particularly confident. He looked extremely drunk and was growing impatient to be a witness for the upcoming events. Impossible. Lin Feng might return to the imperial city alone. He is strong, but it still isn't enough for him to cope with the entire Wanshou sect. He would need to be much stronger than them to take on that many people. Wait until he is strong enough and then he will definitely come, but it is impossible for now. Said someone next to them. Many people were nodding in agreement. Indeed, Lin Feng should be returning to the imperial city alone. After all, Lin Feng was known in the imperial city for being Yu Menghe's son. He didn't have to be impatient with his revenge. Waiting for a while before going to settle grudges with the Wanshou sect and the holy courtyard of Shuiyu was normal. Boom! 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 The entire restaurant started to shake as if there was an earthquake. Everyone was stupefied. What was happening? Besides, the restaurant was starting to shake even more. It seemed like it was going to collapse. What's going on? Are those armored horses? Asked some of the people while rushing to look out the windows. In a flash, everyone was left gobsmacked. In the distance, there was an army of armored cavalry charging in perfect formation. Every warrior seemed extremely powerful, and it seemed like there was no end to the sea of cavalry. On the huge road into the imperial city, which would normally be able to hold thousands of people walking side by side, was chaotic as everyone rushed to escape from the road. Those armored horses were galloping towards the imperial city. He has arrived. He is already outside of the imperial city and is charging inside the imperial city, shouted the middle-aged man with the black mole. He looked extremely excited and his eyes were twinkling with glee. Who arrived? Asked Kai Tai. Of course it's Lin Feng. He came with his Qi Xia troops and they're rushing to the imperial city. You're insane, you're babbling nonsense, said Kai Tai in a low voice. He also ran to the windows and looked outside. The restaurant continued shaking and shaking as the armored cavalry moved closer. Many were hoisting several fluttering flags with large words written in blood. Revival of the Yunhai sect, a debt of blood must be paid in blood. Those words were written using the blood of their enemies. It was striking to the eye, which made Kai Tai and the middle-aged man's hearts suddenly pound violently. The Yunhai sect, Lin Feng. It was really Lin Feng. Surprisingly, he would really charge into the imperial city with the Qi Xia troops. He wanted to charge into the imperial city with an army. Lin Feng wanted to avenge the Yunhai sect, and make his enemies pay in blood. Kai Tai turned his head around and walked back to the drunkard. The drunkard was smug and looked like he never had any doubts about Lin Feng coming with an army. He had guessed right. He hadn't even gone out to see, but he already knew that it was Lin Feng. The people in the restaurant weren't the only ones who were astonished, the people outside were astonished too. Everyone had started leaving buildings and formed a crowd on both sides of the road as they watched this scene. In the past, this used to be Shuiyu's most respected group of hardened warriors. They used to work for Shuiyu and protect the border from Moyu's invasions. But Moyu and Shuiyu had fought a huge battle and hundreds of thousands of soldiers had died. Lu Zonglan was captured and brought back to the imperial city for execution, but Lin Feng charged in and saved him. By doing this he obtained a fief, Yangzhou city, and the Qi Xia army became the personal troops of the Marquis. The Qi Xia troops were just like in the rumors, they were famous throughout Shuiyu. Their fame had even spread outside of the country and many enemies were wary of them. The thunderous sound of galloping filled the air. It seemed like the ground was going to give way to this incredible army. In a flash, the troops arrived in front of the imperial city. Their every movement was in perfect formation. The army was vast and majestic. The guards of the imperial city looked puzzled. What was happening? Were the Qi Xia troops going to siege the imperial city again? Xine was the new officer of the guards at the imperial city gate. When he saw all those red armored horses and the banners written in blood, he immediately guessed who that was. Lin Feng and his Qi Xia troops. At that moment, Xine's eyes lit up. He looked at them and said, "Where is the Qi Xia Marquis?" "I'm here," said a voice from the middle of the troops. Then, a ferocious beast flew into the air and arrived above the imperial city gate. Lin Feng was seated on the winged tiger whilst looking down at them, staring at Xine in particular, which stupefied many observers. Lin Feng's eyes looked ice cold and ominous glints were twinkling in the winged tiger's eyes. How scary! Marquis Lin Feng, you should know that an army from outside the city cannot enter into the imperial city. You are only permitted to enter with a fraction of these people," said Xine. He was speaking very slowly in order to try and remain calm. An army from outside of the imperial city, especially private armies, couldn't freely enter the imperial city, especially not in full force, otherwise they had the power to create chaos. Xine didn't want to bear the responsibility for that. Besides, if Lin Feng had come to the imperial city with all his troops, it wasn't with any good intentions. He had come to get his revenge. Do you remember Meng Chong and Meng Han? Lin Feng didn't say much, only a few words, with a calm voice. Xine's mouth started twitching. Of course he remembered Meng Chong and Meng Han. Back then, Meng Chong was standing where he was standing at that moment, and Meng Chong was Meng Han's son. They had offended Lin Feng and prevented him from entering the imperial city, so he butchered them and even left them impaled on the city walls. Chapter 487, Returning to the Holy Courtyard. Lin Feng was warning him and also clearly threatening him. Lin Feng wanted him to remember why Meng Chong and Meng Han died. Besides, back then, Lin Feng hadn't even broken through to the Xian Qi layer, and he wasn't as famous and influential as he was now. He didn't have any support behind him back then. Back then, everyone had no idea who Lin Feng's parents were. They didn't know two of the most powerful cultivators of the country were his parents. Lin Feng had become much stronger than he was in the past. He had destroyed the Haoyu sect, taken control of the Yunhai mountain chain. Everything he did was incredible. Xine couldn't stop Lin Feng, otherwise he would be killed as well. Lin Feng had become a death god, he would kill anyone who obstructed his way. Nobody dared to try and stop him from his path of revenge. There are limits to my patience. Hurry up and make a decision, said Lin Feng indifferently, but Xine was flustered. He had to make a decision and fast, otherwise Lin Feng would lose his temper. Actually, I see now that there are many strong individual cultivators, the rest can enter the imperial city as their entourage, there is absolutely no problem, said Xine while glancing at the troops. They were all much stronger than they were in the past. All of them looked monstrously strong and reeked of blood. The deadly qi that the Qi Xia troops were releasing was much stronger than in the past. They could force people to prostrate with fear just by releasing their qi. Their facial expressions were extremely stern and bloodthirsty. Everyone was wondering what method Lin Feng used on them to allow them to have such a drastic increase in strength. The Qi Xia troops were now much more terrifying. With their strength, entering the city is obviously easy. It's a good thing, because they have a bad temper, said Lin Feng indifferently. Xine nodded slightly. If Lin Feng had to force his way into the city with his troops, they would have been considered an armed rebellion which would have given his enemies an excuse to complain. However, at that moment, Lin Feng was entering the city and the only one responsible for it was Xine. Nobody would be able to blame Lin Feng for forcing his way into the city. Lin Feng had given Xine two choices, the first was to die, the second one was to bear the responsibility for letting him enter. Lin Feng already had absolute control over the situation. Open the gate. Let them in, sighed Xine. Lin Feng looked extremely confident. He knew that Xine was going to open the gate, he had given him no choice. Everyone knew that he was using threats to cheat the system, but nobody dared say a word. A wise choice, said Lin Feng while smiling. Xine looked extremely upset and was hoping that nothing bad would happen when they entered the city. Xine had given an order, so those guards in charge of the gate opened it without hesitation. They didn't want to face Lin Feng, he was extremely violent and powerful. On top of that, it was Xine's order, so the guards in charge of the gate weren't responsible. They opened the gate and the Qi Xia troops galloped into the imperial city. A cloud of dust rose into the air around them as they rushed forward. The Qi Xia troops then took the form of a long dragon as the army weaved through the city gate. The people outside of the imperial city watched the cavalry gallop into the city and then quickly followed behind them. It seemed like something incredible was going to happen and they didn't want to miss it. The Qi Xia troops were galloping through the city with incredible speed. It looked like a hurricane was passing through the city streets. Inside the imperial city, Everyone became hysterical and started to flee when they saw an army invading the city streets. They feared that the city was being invaded. The people quickly noticed that the troops ignored them and continued galloping in one direction, towards the holy courtyard of Shuiyu. Everyone in the country knew that Duan Tianlang had destroyed the Yunhai sect and created the holy courtyard of Shuiyu. Now it seemed that Lin Feng had come to get his revenge. The news spread very quickly. When people saw that the armored cavalry were galloping in the direction of the holy courtyard, some people rushed there to inform the holy courtyard's guards. Everyone in the city gradually noticed that the troops were Lin Feng's army who were rushing to the holy courtyard. At that moment, the holy courtyard of Shuiyu was in a state of alert and its members were hysterical. They were all terrified. According to the rumors, the Haoyu sect and the Ice and Snow Mountain village were completely annihilated. None of them were able to escape the slaughter. It had been a complete bloodbath. Lin Feng had slaughtered them to the last person, to avenge the Yunhai sect. Towards those who helped destroy the Yunhai sect in the past, Lin Feng was merciless. Some people, at the holy courtyard of Shuiyu, were starting to pack their things and preparing to escape. It was too dangerous for them to stay. Duan Tianlang wouldn't be able to protect the holy courtyard of Shuiyu. It was said that Lin Feng had tens of thousands of troops. Against such a monstrous strength, they couldn't do anything. All they could do was run in terror. The members of the holy courtyard of Shuiyu, or at least a great majority of them, were outstanding disciples selected from the greatest sects of the country. When they heard that their former sects had been destroyed, they didn't know what to think. Now Lin Feng's arrival at the holy courtyard of Shuiyu was imminent. They weren't thinking about revenge, they were just terrified, thinking of how to escape. In the distance, the sound of thunderous galloping filled the air. Those sounds grew louder and louder. The members of the courtyard knew that the Qi Xia troops were getting closer. At that moment, the Qi Xia troops were only a few hundred meters away from the holy courtyard of Shuiyu. Their eyes were all filled with hatred and a monstrous deadly energy into the air. This scene was extremely frightening. The Qi Xia troops hated Duan Tianlang the most. In the past, Duan Tianlang's plots had caused hundreds of thousands from the Qi Xia army to die. They had been utterly defeated because of him and then they were forced into retreat. Besides, he had also caused Lutsang land's cultivation to be crippled. Every single member of the Qi Xia troops hated Duan Tianlang to the bone. There wasn't a single member in the army that would spare his life. Now, Lin Feng had brought them to the imperial city, to the holy courtyard of Shuiyu, where Duan Tianlang was waiting. When they arrived at the gates, the horses neighed and stopped. They looked at the large gates of the holy courtyard of Shuiyu and blocked all other exits. Those who were trying to come out of the holy courtyard of Shuiyu were shocked and forced to remain. They were motionless and blankly staring at the troops surrounding them. That deadly qi was extremely oppressive and caused them to shiver. A deathly silence invaded the atmosphere. The Qi Xia troops didn't say a word and remained in silence. There was only their deadly qi floating in the atmosphere. That type of silence was what scared people the most. The uncertainty of waiting filled their souls with fear. They all wanted to escape from the holy courtyard of Shuiyu, but if that collection of deadly qi reached their bodies, they would die. Lin Feng appeared in the air above the holy courtyard of Shuiyu, one person, one beast, just like the last time he had come. However, last time, he hadn't attacked. He only humiliated Duan Tianlang and the holy courtyard of Shuiyu. It was the same winged tiger who killed one of the teachers when they were last there. But this time, it was different. Everybody perfectly understood why Lin Feng had come. It was written on a huge flag in blood, revival of the Yunhai sect, a debt of blood must be paid in blood. Lin Feng had come for his revenge. He hadn't killed Duan Tianlang last time because he wanted Duan Tianlang to witness the destruction of the holy courtyard of Shuiyu with his own eyes. He also wanted Duan Tianlang to witness the revival of the Yunhai sect. The Yunhai sect had been revived and the holy courtyard of Shuiyu was doomed. Duan Tianlang, get your ass over here! Shouted Lin Feng. His powerful voice broke the silence, making the atmosphere tremble as his voice spread throughout the holy courtyard of Shuiyu. Everybody in the courtyard could hear Lin Feng's furious voice. Duan Tianlang, get your ass over here. Lin Feng, the holy courtyard of Shuiyu is a holy land for cultivators. Come battle to death as a cultivator, said a voice coming from inside the holy courtyard of Shuiyu. Everybody was astonished, including Lin Feng. Was Duan Tianlang challenging Lin Feng to a battle to the death? Middle troops, come inside with me. Left troops obstruct all the exits and prevent anyone from leaving. Right troops, pay attention to the air, said Lin Feng indifferently. The winged tiger also went into the holy courtyard of Shuiyu. At the same time, the middle troops followed him, but they were on the ground while Lin Feng was in the sky. The left and right troops then obeyed Lin Feng's order, preventing anyone from escaping by land or air. Nobody was permitted to leave. Lin Feng completely sealed the holy courtyard of Shuiyu. Chapter 488. The mysterious group Lin Feng appeared in the air above the cultivation tower of the holy courtyard of Shuiyu. On the ground, the members of the courtyard raised their heads to look at him and his winged tiger. In such a short period of time, Lin Feng had appeared above their tower again. Besides, this time, he had brought thousands of soldiers with him. He wanted to exterminate the holy courtyard of Shuiyu. At the foot of the cultivation tower there were a group of people who slowly rose into the air waiting. Duan Tianlang was standing in the middle of that group. He looked majestic and had regained his commanding presence. Apart from Duan Tianlang, there were a few people. They were not from the holy courtyard but they were allied with Duan Tianlang at that moment. The chi from that group was extremely powerful. They were all at the Xian Qi layer. This time, the holy courtyard of Shuiyu had appeared in full strength. It seems like you've been preparing for this battle, said Lin Feng while giving a faint scowl. Duan Tianlang looked like he was waiting for him. I've been waiting for a while, said Duan Tianlang. His eyes were as cold as ice. This time, he didn't look scared at all. Lin Feng's eyes also grew cold. He quickly glanced at those people and asked himself why Duan Tianlang was acting so confident. Lin Feng continued to look at those people, but he really couldn't notice anything strange. They looked extremely ordinary, and precisely because of that, this situation seemed unusually dangerous. But it was clear to Lin Feng that those people wouldn't be that ordinary, otherwise why would they be standing with Duan Tianlang? Those 18 cultivators of the Xian Qi layer from the other night, did you send them? Asked Lin Feng while looking at those people. In total, there were 5 people standing by Duan Tianlang's side. It seemed like they were protecting him. Those 5 people looked at Lin Feng perplexed. Then one of them asked, "Did you kill them?" That sentence was simple, but in a way he was admitting that those people were sent by them. "I did," said Lin Feng indifferently while nodding. Their eyes grew sharp but they didn't say anything, they were just glaring at Lin Feng. "Among you and Duan Tianlang, who is the boss and who is the servant?" asked Lin Feng. What he meant was, between Duan Tianlang and those 5 people, who had a higher status? Those 5 people were probably stronger than those 18 cultivators of the Xian Qi layer he fought last time. Besides, Duan Tianlang looked extremely confident with them here. It seemed like they had the strength to make Duan Tianlang feel at ease. Lin Feng believed that these people's social status must be very high. The loss of those 18 cultivators of the Xian Qi layer seemed like nothing to them. The fact that they were dead didn't seem to affect those 5 people greatly. There was only a slight change in their expressions. 18 cultivators of the Xian Qi layer were a powerful force. If they had been part of an influential group in Shuiyu, they could have accomplished great things. But those people didn't care about the 18 cultivators of the Xian Qi layer. What did that mean? What was their social status? "There is no use in giving answers to the dead," said one of those people in an indifferent tone, which made Duan Tianlang smile. He looked at Lin Feng while seeming fearless and mockingly said, "Lin Feng, the other night, you had an opportunity to kill me but you didn't. I guarantee you that it was the biggest mistake you made in your entire life. You missed your chance that night and today you will die because of it." It seems like these people are above you, you are just their lackey, a servant, a worthless dog," said Lin Feng while ignoring Duan Tianlang. He then continued, in a low voice, "I had never thought that the majestic Duan Tianlang, who has the status of a noble, would be someone else's servant. I am surprised. I had thought that, even though Duan Tianlang was a bit weak, he was still a noble. And a noble ended up being a mere lackey, some other people's little dog." Lin Feng's words astonished many members of the Holy Courtyard of Shuiyu. He was saying that the founder of the Holy Courtyard of Shuiyu was someone else's lackey. They had never thought about that before. Duan Tianlang was a noble and his status was majestic. How could he be someone's lackey? But in fact, Duan Tianlang was clearly obeying these 5 people. "I don't really want to know that much, I'm just curious. If Duan Tianlang is someone's servant, it means that those at the top must be more important than the members of the imperial clan. Besides, the great competition is approaching and the imperial clan would strive to keep me alive, they want me to represent them in the great competition, so what role are you guys planning?" asked Lin Feng. He looked perplexed but was slightly surprised. Duan Tianlang was a noble with the blood of the imperial clan, but he seemed to worship those 5 people. Lin Feng didn't believe that these people were from a force outside of the imperial city. They had to have a very high social status in the imperial city. That was the only explanation. But the second Prince Duan Wuye favored Lin Feng and everybody was aware that he protected Lin Feng. Besides, after the banquet the other night, everyone was certain that he was going to be chosen for the great competition of Shuiyu. The imperial clan would benefit greatly from his participation and had no reason to want Lin Feng dead. That was also why Lin Feng had fearlessly charged into the imperial city with his troops, and he had guessed right, the guards let him in and no one else blocked his path. But Lin Feng was realizing that some things were not going as he planned. "You don't need to understand anything, you will not be participating in the great competition of Shuiyu," said one of them while sounding arrogant. This sentence alone confirmed that he wasn't a member of the imperial clan. "I'm just worried about you, nobody will know that you died for such a worthless cause," said Lin Feng, which astonished those 5 people. Die for a worthless cause? Lin Feng still thought that the ones who were going to die was still going to be them. "Don't you think that you are being way too confident when it comes to your cultivation? You're still so foolish and way too arrogant," said Duan Tianlang while smiling coldly and staring at Lin Feng. But Lin Feng shook his head and looked at those people in a mocking way as if he had been looking at utter fools. "I don't need to borrow anyone else's power to fight against you, Duan Tianlang, or even to destroy the entire holy courtyard of Shuiyu, but since you resorted to becoming someone else's dog, I will kill them first and then I will exterminate the holy courtyard of Shuiyu," said Lin Feng indifferently. When he finished talking, a group of people at the front of the army removed their helmets and rose into the air to swiftly join Lin Feng. When people saw their faces, they were astonished. They were women. The group of people rising into the air was composed completely of women. There were 36 women that joined Lin Feng. All of them were indifferent and their chi was peculiar. Those women had formed a 4x9 battle formation. The lovesick forest, the opponents were astonished. Those women in white clothes were from the lovesick forest. "She gave them to you," said the one who had just spoken out while staring at Lin Feng, sharp lights were twinkling in his eyes. The women of the lovesick forest. Even though they weren't very strong alone, they maintained their pure hearts and concentrated fully on cultivation, they would link their powers together using witchcraft. When they fought together in formation, they were extremely powerful, nobody dared to belittle the power of those women. "It seems like your confidence wasn't that justified," said Lin Feng while smiling coldly, which astonished those 5 people. These 36 women were a terrifying fighting force. 6 times 4 formations against those 5 people, the rest will stop anybody else who tries to escape," said Lin Feng indifferently. Immediately, 24 women immediately attacked the 5 people while the other 12 rose higher in the air and formed a circle formation around the fight and created a barrier using spells. Lin Feng was a little shocked, these women were able to form a 12-person formation. At that moment, their position was truly perfect, nobody would be able to escape from inside. Duan Tianlang was astonished and stared at Lin Feng. His smile had completely disappeared from his face. He just looked vigilant and he was shaking with fear. Those groups of women in a battle formation were extremely dangerous. Duan Tianlang could only hope that the 5 people with him would be able to protect him. If his 5 accomplices were defeated, Duan Tianlang was doomed to die. When Duan Tianlang thought about that, he grew extremely nervous. Chapter 489, The Snow Dragon Robe. The battle started, people were growing hysterical as a terrifying chi dispersed in the atmosphere. 5 battles were taking place in the sky. Those 5 people had justifications for being arrogant. They had all broken through to the 5th Xian Qi layer, especially the one who spoke for them. He was at the peak of the 5th Xian Qi layer, only 1 step away from breaking through to the 6th Xian Qi layer. His strength was terrifying. However, 4 women were surprisingly able to suppress him, which meant that the other women could take care of the others. 2 formations were enough to completely suppress them. Duan Tianlang was astonished when he saw that, and the crowd was shocked as well. Those women had terrifying battle powers when working together. Their battle formation was perfect, they could carry out perfect attacks when fighting together, and their power was explosive. Those 5 cultivators of the 5th Xian Qi layer were completely under control. Yu Menghe hadn't wasted her time during the last 18 years, she had raised those women and turned them into a powerful fighting force. Now, she had given those women to Lin Feng. With his natural abilities, it was like giving a tiger wings. I wonder where those women come from. With those battle formations and their spells, their fighting ability is terrifying, thought many people when they saw those women. They were all so young, all of them were around 20 years old. The crowd knew that those women weren't weak, but the most important fact was that they had devoted their entire lives to cultivation and rarely had contact with the outside world, which meant that their hearts weren't polluted by the world. They only followed their master for their entire lives and had made great progress in their cultivation. Besides, there were 2 sorts of cultivators who could increase their cultivation extremely quickly. People who belonged to the first category had pure hearts which were unpolluted by the mundane world. Apart from practicing cultivation, they didn't know anything else. All they did in life was practice cultivation, nothing else. People who belonged to the second category were the extremely stubborn types. They had extremely high requirements when it came to themselves and their capabilities. They expected a great deal from themselves. To progress in cultivation, they were ready to do anything. They didn't spare any effort on their path of cultivation. Their only goal was to enhance their cultivation. For cultivation, they didn't stop fighting and push themselves to the limit. They would kill their enemies without hesitation. That kind of stubborn cultivator would always progress by leaps and bounds. Those 2 categories of people could progress very quickly on the path of cultivation. Those women belonged to the first category, their hearts were pure. Even though it was impossible for a person's heart to remain absolutely pure, they were still much purer than other people. Besides, Lin Feng belonged more to the second category than the first. While he had removed some of the pollution from his heart, his greatest strength was his expectations of himself. He was extremely stubborn and was determined to continue growing stronger. The sounds of battle filled the air. The atmosphere was trembling violently with the shockwaves. Duan Tianlang was watching the battle with a look of astonishment. His confidence had completely disappeared. 5 cultivators at the 5th Xian Qi layer were surprisingly being suppressed. If Lin Feng wanted to kill them, he could. How could Duan Tianlang not be scared? Lin Feng glanced over at Duan Tianlang, which made him feel even more nervous as coldness invaded his heart. Scum! Said Lin Feng indifferently, which stupefied Duan Tianlang. At that moment, Lin Feng was looking at him in a particularly scornful way. A moment before, Duan Tianlang had acted as if he was standing high above everyone. He looked down on Lin Feng and behaved arrogantly. But at this moment, his 5 accomplices were completely suppressed and Duan Tianlang had returned to being a scared whimpering dog. In Lin Feng's eyes, Duan Tianlang was the scum of the world. In the past, Duan Tianlang was much stronger than Lin Feng, but at that moment, Lin Feng had the power to look down on him. In the past, Lin Feng was nothing in front of Duan Tianlang. He was extremely arrogant, but at that moment, he was powerless in front of Lin Feng. He was nothing more than an insect. Apart from dread, Duan Tianlang's heart was filled with a mixture of strange feelings. He used to be a majestic and powerful noble, but at that moment, everything had changed. Lin Feng just glanced at Duan Tianlang for a second and then looked at the battle again. Those 5 people all released their spirits. Surprisingly, they mainly had weapon spirits. They all began to use energy attacks in an attempt to break free from the formation. They were all extremely strong. Lin Feng was becoming more and more curious. He really wanted to know who they were. I don't believe that you can remain unperturbed when facing death, thought Lin Feng. He then released some terrifying deadly energy. The people on the ground were all astonished. Lin Feng looked at one of the 5 cultivators and his eyes grew ferocious. Lin Feng's eyes turned pitch black as he released some deadly qi and sword intent. Die, said Lin Feng in an ice-cold tone. Then Lin Feng started moving like the wind and rushed towards that cultivator of the 5th Xian Qi layer. The other 4 cultivators sensed that Lin Feng was attacking and started to tremble. While Lin Feng was attacking, they couldn't do much, they could barely move. Immediately after, the women forced the other 4 cultivators away, opening a way for Lin Feng. Everyone was gasping with astonishment because the cooperation between them was incredible. That cultivator at the 5th Xian Qi layer was shaking violently. Powerful energies continued to bombard the atmosphere and the sounds of collisions were unceasing. At the same time, Lin Feng released some more terrifying deadly energy which made that cultivator frown, and all his muscles started to twitch. Immediately after, just like an illusion, Lin Feng appeared. He destroyed the energies released by the cultivator and immediately arrived in front of him. That cultivator of the Xian Qi layer only felt a gust of wind pass by his body and immediately noticed Lin Feng. Lin Feng released a deadly qi filled with sword intent and pressed it against the cultivator's throat. The energy seemed extremely weak compared to normal, but it was more than enough to pierce through his throat. Gulp. The cultivator swallowed with fright. When he felt that deadly qi against his throat felt extremely dry and he looked terrified. At that moment, Lin Feng could kill him whenever he wished. If he was killed, all the years he spent on cultivation would disappear with him. Tell me who you are, said Lin Feng coldly, which made that person's eyes twinkle as if he had a chance of survival. If I tell you, will you let me go? Asked that person with a glimmer of hope in his eyes. His determination had been crushed. Telling Lin Feng didn't matter. Lin Feng was already a dead man. I am not interested in your life, said Lin Feng in a cold and detached tone which caused the man to have a hope of surviving. He had already broken through to the 5th Xian Qi layer. In Shuiyu, there were only a few dozen people who were stronger than him, no more than 100. Dying here didn't seem worth it. I want you to say it yourself and swear that you will let me off if I tell you, said the cultivator. He didn't trust Lin Feng. If you speak the truth, I will not kill you, promised Lin Feng. All right, said that person while nodding. He opened his mouth again, but at that moment, a voice interrupted from the distance. No need to ask him. I will tell you who he is, said the voice. Everybody turned their heads and looked into the distance. There was a man wearing a snow dragon robe. He was flying calmly through the air and looked majestic. The people from the holy courtyard were filled with admiration while looking at him. What shocked Lin Feng was that person's face. He looked very familiar. A relative of Shi Qiong, Lin Feng thought at that moment. Indeed, that person and Shi Qiong looked very similar. The one who was being threatened by Lin Feng grew frightened and the 4 others who were being trapped by the women looked delighted. Their leader had arrived. Their leader wasn't an ordinary officer. Other officers, in front of him, were forced to show him respect and reverence. They all worshipped him. Ordinary officers even acknowledged their allegiance to him because he was a shining star. "Do you know who I am and why I want to kill you?" asked that person while staring at Lin Feng. "Because of Shi Qiong?" asked Lin Feng. "Indeed, he was my son, but you still dared to kill him," said that person coldly and calmly. His face was filled with killing intent. "Shi Qiong deserved to die," said Lin Feng in a cold and detached way. Shi Qiong had tried to kill him and had humiliated Meng Qing, so Lin Feng didn't regret killing him. "If he deserved to die, then you deserve to die 10,000 deaths," said that person with an extremely scary look on his face. Chapter 490, Life and Death Gamble. I deserve to die 10,000 deaths? Lin Feng was staring at his interlocutor and smiling coldly. "Well, before I die, tell me who you are, what is your status? Wait until the moment before your death and I will tell you," said that person still not revealing his status. In Shuiyu, there were people who were hidden in the shadows. Very few people knew who they were. They were the most mysterious group of the country. In order to be part of this group, people had to be at least at the Xian Qi layer. In the imperial city, they were always present. The imperial clan was extremely strong for two reasons. One was because of their blood spirit, the other one was that group of elite troops. One of their missions was to kill rebels within the country. "Lin Feng, you are the Marquis of Yangzhou and you came into the imperial city with an army. That is an extremely serious crime. You and your army will die, all of you," said that middle-aged man in a cold and detached tone. "After killing you, I will kill everyone you brought with you. None of you respect the laws of Shuiyu, so I will give all of you the death penalty. None of you will be left alive." How aggressive and arrogant, thought the people on the ground. They were all looking at him with admiration. Shi Qiong was already very strong, but his father was much stronger. He was probably stronger than those 5 cultivators of the 5th Xian Qi layer. Which meant that he had at least broken through to the 6th Xian Qi layer. At such high levels, a single cultivation layer would make a huge difference. A cultivator of the 6th Xian Qi layer was much stronger than a group of cultivators at the 5th Xian Qi layer. Everyone was trying to guess what that person's social status was. Duan Tianlang and those 5 cultivators of the 5th Xian Qi layer looked like they revered and worshipped him, so wasn't that person's social status much higher than them? Duan Tianlang was looking at him with admiration and respect, so what was his status? He looked majestic and released a commanding presence. The affairs of the imperial city were very mysterious. Many people couldn't understand the affairs of the city, all they could do was guess. In the past, most people thought that cultivators of the 3rd and 4th Xian Qi layer were amazing, but after the genius competition of Shuiyu, stronger and stronger cultivators were revealing themselves from the shadows. There were many people who were hiding from the public eyes. Apart from cultivators of the 4th Xian Qi layer, there were even cultivators of the 5th Xian Qi layer who were hidden, and now, there was someone even stronger. "Sorry, but what you are saying is absolutely unjustified. Those people are not an army, they belong to my sect. They are lone cultivators from the Yunhai sect who traveled to the imperial city with me. I am not acting as the Qi Xia Marquis today, instead I am acting as the patriarch of the Yunhai sect. In the past, Duan Tianlang destroyed the Yunhai sect, and today, as the patriarch of the Yunhai sect, I will avenge the Yunhai sect. What is so inappropriate about that?" said Lin Feng loudly and firmly. Many people were gobsmacked. If Lin Feng had come to the holy courtyard of Shuiyu using his status as the patriarch of the Yunhai sect and people from his sect had followed him into the imperial city, then technically it didn't break any laws. He had the right to seek revenge for his sect. Besides, what do you intend to do? By attacking me while hiding your social status. You're saying that I committed a crime. What gives you the right to speak when you don't even know a thing? Said Lin Feng in an ice-cold tone. He coldly stared at his interlocutor and remained unyielding. Even though he was weaker than his interlocutor, his words weren't weak at all. Lin Feng was fearless. Even if Lin Feng had to risk his life, who knew who would come out victorious? The result couldn't be predicted. Lin Feng understood that arguing with him was useless. Strength was the most important thing in this world. Strength would determine who was right and who was wrong. That was the basic principle in this world of cultivation. If your fist was strong enough to silence the opposition, it didn't matter if you were wrong. Lin Feng couldn't afford to act as the weaker side in front of that person, otherwise the other person would have the advantage. As expected, when Lin Feng said that, a terrifying qi invaded the atmosphere. It was extremely frightening and created a roar as it tore through the sky. It sounded like a furious flood dragon. The man wanted to use force to win. Lin Feng didn't look at that man again. He turned his head to look at the cultivator of the fifth Xian Qi layer. He smiled coldly and said, "You still haven't told me who you are. If he doesn't want to speak, you should tell me." That person looked extremely tense and nervous. He was shaking from head to toe. Lin Feng's hand was surrounded by an extremely sharp deadly qi. Lin Feng kept his hand pressed against that person's throat the entire time. He hadn't changed his position. That person hadn't tried to break free from Lin Feng because he could feel Lin Feng's sharp qi pressing against his throat. If Lin Feng had sensed any movements, Lin Feng would have immediately killed him. Therefore, he didn't dare to move at all. At that moment, Lin Feng was forcing him to talk. Shi Qiong's father also looked down at him with an ice-cold look in his eyes. That cultivator of the fifth Xian Qi layer felt that the pressure surrounding his was growing. He felt like he was carrying two gigantic mountains, one on each shoulder. It was clear to him that he couldn't reveal their social status. It was their most basic rule and it would be enforced now that an officer was present. They always acted in secret within the country. Even if they appeared in public, they would never stay in the open for long. Today their purpose was to kill Lin Feng and then disappear as quickly as possible. People would usually forget about them with time. The problem they faced at that moment was, not only were they unable to kill Lin Feng, but on top of that, Lin Feng was forcing him to talk. "You know what will happen if you talk," said Shi Qiong's father coldly. Which caused that person to pull a long face. If he didn't talk, Lin Feng would kill him. If he talked, Shi Qiong's father would kill him. It was a dead end either way. "If you don't talk, I will immediately kill you," said Lin Feng coldly, which made that person's facial expression grow more hideous. "Officer," said that person while looking at Shi Qiong's father in a hopeless and desperate way. He was hoping that Shi Qiong's father would save his life. "He will not kill you, he wouldn't dare. If he does, he will be considered a rebel and he will be sentenced to death along with his entire family and everyone close to him," said Shi Huan, but that person didn't believe it and looked over to Lin Feng. "I will give you 10 seconds," said Lin Feng calmly. "You know perfectly what will happen if you talk. He's just threatening you, he won't dare to act. I'm telling you that he will not kill you, which means that he will not kill you," said Shi Huan as he was gambling that Lin Feng would stay his hand. "If he kills you, I will kill him, everybody will be a witness," said Shi Huan, but he wasn't looking at that cultivator of the fifth Xian Qi layer at all. He was only staring at Lin Feng. He was clearly threatening Lin Feng. 7 seconds, said Lin Feng indifferently, ignoring Shi Huan. Shi Huan released an extremely oppressive qi. Lin Feng could feel how oppressive and wild the qi was. It was terrifying. The cultivator Lin Feng was threatening could also feel that oppressive qi. Shi Huan was hoping that Lin Feng wouldn't do anything when he sensed the oppressive qi. 4 seconds, said Lin Feng indifferently. The cultivator looked extremely tense. Shi Huan's qi was becoming more and more violent and brutal in the air. If that person talked, Shi Huan would kill him, but if Lin Feng dared to kill him, then Shi Huan would kill Lin Feng. 2 seconds, said Lin Feng. The person's facial muscles were twitching as he thought. He was gnashing his teeth, but he wasn't speaking. Under such an oppressive qi, he would die if he spoke. It was extremely possible that Lin Feng wouldn't dare to kill him when facing Shi Huan. 1 second. He just remained silent, but the silence was terrifying. "Idiot," said Lin Feng as if he found the situation to be ridiculous. 10 seconds had already elapsed. His fingertip penetrated into the man's throat and then was pulled out with a slash. That person's pupils abruptly shrunk, but his eyes were wide open in shock. He looked terrified. Lin Feng didn't say anything superfluous. He immediately killed him when the time was over. Lin Feng wouldn't dare to kill him. Ignorant. His choice was clearly flawed in many ways. If he had really cared about your life, he wouldn't have threatened to kill me in retaliation. Since he initially wanted to kill me regardless, why would I be intimidated by his threats? Said Lin Feng indifferently, which stupefied Shi Huan. As expected, Shi Huan didn't take action. He didn't even look at the cultivator who died. It was as if his death had nothing to do with Shi Huan. Shi Huan only wanted one thing: to kill Lin Feng. That cultivator of the 5th Xian Qi layer couldn't close his eyes even in death. His body fell from the sky with wide eyes. A cultivator of the 5th Xian Qi layer had just died by Lin Feng's hands. "I must say that I admire your courage," said Shi Huan while looking emotionless and releasing a thick deadly energy. But when facing a much stronger cultivator, courage is useless. At that moment, Shi Huan released a monstrous qi which filled the air and crashed in Lin Feng's direction. "Even though you're strong, what gives you the audacity to say, much stronger?" laughed Lin Feng. 36 Celestial Swords Formation, Condense. Chapter 491, Sword Formation. After Lin Feng said those words, multiple sword lights started to appear. 36 swords emerged from his body, which diffused extremely sharp lights. At the same time, those 36 women moved too. They all rushed into formation. Colorful ribbons appearing in the air as the women used their ribbons to grab hold of those swords. Their silhouettes then flickered as they rose higher into the air. Those 36 women were all attacking at the same time, their ribbons fluttering violently as they rushed through the air. The swords they were holding with their ribbons were creating a terrifying buzzing sound. The buzzing sound from each sword started to synchronize and which created a strange whistling sound in the air. The formations of those women were precise and exquisite. In small formations, they were able to suppress those cultivators of the 5th Xian Qi layer, and at that moment, they were using the 36 celestial swords formation. Shi Huan suddenly looked extremely tense. He only saw the 36 swords condense and then violently rush through the air until each sword was pointing at him. The qi from those swords was terrifying. "A pitiful sword formation, do you think such a thing is useful against me?" shouted Shi Huan arrogantly. His body shook and he stretched his hands, releasing a flood dragon into the sky. "Empowered sword!" shouted Lin Feng. The 36 women suddenly released their pure qi which rushed through their colorful ribbons towards the swords. The pure qi then rushed into the swords at the end of the ribbons. The buzzing sounds from the swords grew more and more intense. The power of the swords was increased as they started to buzz even louder and were shaking in the air. Roar! Shi Huan's flood dragon bared its fangs and brandished its claws. As the swords grew more violent in the air, the swords suddenly created an extremely loud whistling sound in the air. Shortly after, dazzling and resplendent lights emerged from the tip of each sword, which then pierced through the atmosphere toward Shi Huan's flood dragon. Those terrifying sword lights pierced through the flood dragon's body. In a flash the dragon was completely destroyed. Besides, even though those sword lights looked slightly weakened, they still contained a terrifying power which rushed toward Shi Huan. "Ha!" Shi Huan frowned. That sword formation was much stronger than he expected. Boom! A powerful pure qi condensed in the air and formed a wall which slowed the sword lights, but as before, it was unable to block them. "Break!" shouted Shi Huan. He took a step forwards and released a terrifying pure qi from his body. A flood dragon roared and then bombarded towards the sword lights, the sword lights exploded into multiple small lights which looked like stars before they dispersed. "Shadow swords!" shouted Lin Feng like a powerful general commanding his troops. In the air, above Shi Huan, multiple silhouettes appeared. Those 36 women took advantage of a small gap and had gained a complete advantage in this battle. The sword shadows rushed through the atmosphere and sword lights started rushing toward Shi Huan from above like shooting stars. Those 36 swords moved with incredible speed through the air and created strange shadow swords from their afterimages which started to attack Shi Huan. The 36 celestial sword formation was a battle formation which Lin Feng had taken from the memories of the Zun Qi layer cultivator. It was extremely hard to use because it required 36 people to use a sword. There had to be 36 souls connected in perfect synchronization to control the 36 swords in the formation. Lin Feng had taught the women that sword formation and the result wasn't bad at all. "Get lost!" shouted Shi Huan furiously. His flood dragon continuously swiped out its claws against the swords, which created multiple shockwaves in the air. There were countless sword lights and multiple swords in the air to fight against. Shi Huan continued to attack like a madman. He was starting to feel exhausted by this formation and the danger was growing. This was one of the main purposes of the sword formation, it would grow stronger over time. Much stronger. "Kill everyone here. How ignorant can a person be? You're a joke," said Lin Feng coldly, which made Shi Huan pull a long face. When he had arrived, he acted with extreme arrogance as if Lin Feng and his army were already dead. He had thought that with a few movements he could crush Lin Feng and his army to death. He assumed this because he was at the 6th Xian Qi layer. He thought he had enough strength to easily handle Lin Feng and his army. However, at that moment, his arrogance had disappeared and Lin Feng was mocking him in front of everyone. That sword formation was causing him a great deal of problems, as the people he underestimated watched with mocking expressions. "Roar!" A terrifying bestial roar filled the air. Shi Huan suddenly released his flood dragon spirit. "Break!" Shi Huan joined his two fists and started to give off a dangerous air. The shadow swords immediately broke from the powerful energy. "Flood Dragon Warp Fist!" shouted Shi Huan. An endless stream of fists bombarded the atmosphere in all directions. That was his version of the Flood Dragon Warp Fist. Shi Huan's Flood Dragon Warp Fist was much stronger than Shi Qiong's version. He had a much better understanding and control over the power compared to his son. Boom! A terrifying deadly energy invaded the atmosphere and rushed out of the swords like waves. The sword's energy and the Flood Dragon Warp Fists collided in the air with uncountable amount of explosions. Die! Shi Huan rushed backwards to create a gap between them. His body dashed into the sky. He was trying to rush out of the formation and at the same time attack one of the women who was above him. His terrifying fist was streaking across the sky and destroyed all traces of the sword shadows in its path. "Sword Wind!" shouted Lin Feng in a calm and cold voice. The 36 women moved at the same time. They were very agile and extremely well organized. Even though they had to focus on their hearts and souls being connected, they still had the power to follow orders individually with precision. The 36 women attacked with their swords at the same time. There were swords rushing from every direction. They pierced through the air and were heading straight for Shi Huan. The crowd could see the white lights created by those swords. It was terrifying. There was also the strong power of wind surrounding the swords, removing the air resistance. Shi Huan was stupefied. He could see all of the swords around him rush towards his direction. That sword formation was terrifying and those women were highly skilled. They even borrowed the power of the wind to increase the speed of that attack. "Call of the Flood Dragon!" shouted Shi Huan furiously. He joined his two hands and attacked towards the open air. A terrifying flood dragon's call filled the air and it seemed like countless flood dragons had appeared in the air. The countless flood dragons started to rush towards the incoming swords. An incredible counter-force propelled Shi Huan's body backwards. He turned his head around. He then shouted, "You four, how come you haven't killed him?" The four cultivators of the fifth Xian Qi layer were just watching the battle. They had thought that because Shi Huan was fighting, they didn't need to do anything because he would easily deal with Lin Feng. However, the course of the battle was different from what they had expected. Shi Huan was fighting against the 36 women and everyone was captivated by the battle, to the extent they had completely forgotten about Lin Feng. The moment they heard Shi Huan, they immediately looked over to Lin Feng. Indeed, those 36 women were busy with Shi Huan, but killing him wouldn't be simple. Besides, if Lin Feng wasn't commanding them, the battle formation would weaken and Shi Huan would be able to break it with ease. Lin Feng didn't have any other powerful experts in hiding, so nobody else could interfere. If they didn't kill Lin Feng now, when would they do it? If they killed Lin Feng, the battle formation would start to fall apart. The four cultivators of the fifth Xian Qi layer all released their deadly energy and moved towards Lin Feng. They quickly arrived in front of him. Lin Feng had just killed one of their companions, so they wanted revenge. They couldn't miss this golden opportunity. After all, Lin Feng's natural abilities were too terrifying to allow him to live. When Lin Feng sensed their deadly energies, he slowly turned around and looked at the four people. He was smiling coldly. Now, they were going to attempt to kill him. Did they think he had grown soft now that he was alone? Lin Feng opened his hand and released the power of his soul. At the same time, multiple lights started flashing as 36 swords appeared. The terrifying power of those swords caused people's spines to tingle. 36 swords? What is he doing? The onlookers' pupils shrank. The 36 women were already busy fighting against Shi Huan. What did Lin Feng want to do with those 36 swords? Was he going to use all 36 swords himself? Impossible. That was a ridiculous idea. One person could replace a group of people. There were illusion formations, deadly formations, battle formations and countless other formations. But they all required groups of people to be used, but those 36 women were already busy using the 36 celestial swords formation to fight. They needed to focus on their current battle. Did Lin Feng have another group of 36 experts hidden within his troops? How was he planning to use those swords? Chapter 492, One-Man Battle Formation. The four cultivators of the fifth Xian Qi layer surrounded Lin Feng. Even though the 36 women could control the cultivator of the sixth Xian Qi layer, Shi Huan, Lin Feng had to fight alone. This time, you're definitely going to die, said Duan Tianlang while staring at Lin Feng with an evil smile. Lin Feng glanced at Duan Tianlang and said indifferently, "You're not dead yet, so I can't die. You are too confident. Even though you are strong enough to confront a cultivator of the fifth Xian Qi layer, you are now facing four cultivators of the fifth Xian Qi layer. Besides, how do you plan to handle the 36 swords by yourself? Fool! Can you create the formation alone? I don't think so, unless you have another 36 women hiding within your troops," said Duan Tianlang while smiling coldly. He couldn't help but admire Lin Feng though. Lin Feng had been gone through extremely dangerous battles before and always came out victorious. Besides, he was always growing stronger with each battle. If Lin Feng's opponent was weak, it was because he was too strong, but if his opponent was strong, then he would become stronger. The crowd was astonished. Duan Tianlang was speaking as if Lin Feng was already dead. Duan Tianlang still felt puzzled. Who said that I can't control 36 swords by myself? Said Lin Feng while smiling coldly. He then abruptly released his purple spirit and in a flash, 36 purple tentacles appeared, forming arms which grabbed the 36 swords. At the same time, Lin Feng released his soul and used his surplus souls technique. Countless surplus souls penetrated into the purple tentacles. Those swords weren't only controlled by Lin Feng's purple spirit but also by multiple souls. Each sword was under Lin Feng's absolute control. It was exactly the same as if he really had 36 arms. The feeling was the same. That single move caused the people's hearts to pound violently. They were all blankly staring at Lin Feng. The 36 swords started shaking and emitting buzzing sounds in the air. One man was controlling all 36 swords. A single person's ability is indeed limited, but there are endless possibilities on the path of cultivation. You're like a frog at the bottom of a well, you have such a small outlook and little experience, so you judge the world based on your own ability. You act like you know everything, but you actually understand nothing, said Lin Feng while looking at Duan Tianlang, which stupefied him. Lin Feng could surprisingly control 36 swords. Was something like this simple for him? When the crowd heard Lin Feng, it caused everyone to sink deep into contemplation. Indeed, an ordinary person's strength was limited, but when it came to the many paths of cultivation, there were countless possibilities. On the path of cultivation, a single person had millions of ways to achieve their goal. Nothing was considered impossible. Lin Feng was proof, as he was able to control 36 swords by himself, which others deemed impossible. Those 4 cultivators of the 5th Xian Qi layer coldly stared at Lin Feng. They were slightly puzzled. A moment before, Lin Feng had killed their companion. If Lin Feng had the opportunity, why didn't he kill them? If he really had the power to kill them, wouldn't they already be dead? I will attack, you two assist me, Lang Qi, you stay behind me as support, said one of the 4 cultivators to the other 3. They all nodded in agreement. The person who had just spoken had a sword spirit, so his fighting power was the most appropriate to deal with the sword formation. The 4 cultivators all released their spirits at the same time. The one directly facing Lin Feng had a sword spirit. It seemed extremely sharp. The 2 by his sides, each had a blade spirit which seemed brutal. The last person had a beast spirit. It was an evil wolf with a black face. Die! Shouted the one with the sword spirit. His silhouette flickered as his sword emitted an ice-cold light that rushed straight towards Lin Feng. The sword was terrifyingly powerful and was absorbing all the energy from the atmosphere as it attacked. What terrifying sword energy! Thought the crowd on the ground while looking up to the sky. That sword was dazzling, and it created a storm in the air wherever it passed. It released thunderous roars in the atmosphere, like thunderclaps. If anyone else was facing that person, they would have been killed in a flash. As expected, a sword cultivator of the 5th Xian Qi layer was extremely powerful. Empowered sword! Shouted Lin Feng in a deep voice. In a flash, his 36 swords started to absorb his qi and released a powerful sword energy. A terrifying sword energy emerged which caused Lin Feng's opponents to tremble. That sword energy was shocking. Die! Shouted one of the 4 cultivators extremely loudly. Just like autumn leaves falling in the wind, 2 gigantic blades streaked across the sky in Lin Feng's direction. The atmosphere seemed like it was being lacerated by their blades. Go! Shouted Lin Feng. His 36 swords started to tremble and shake. A sharp and dazzling white light emerged from each of the swords. The entire sky was filled with white light. His sword lights looked like shooting stars in the sky as they streaked across the sky in the blink of an eye. Fish. An intense piercing sound filled the air. Lin Feng's sword lights were so fast that it was unimaginable. In a flash, they attacked the sword energy of the 5th Xian Qi layer cultivator and pierced straight through it. That cultivator suddenly looked desperate and hopeless. He wanted to escape, but it was too late already. The white lights were too fast. The crowd only saw the sword light pierce violently through the air. Immediately after, that person's body started to shake. There was a clear wound on his chest. That sword light had pierced straight through his chest. What a terrifying sword! The crowd was shaking. Lin Feng, alone, was able to control 36 swords perfectly and use the 36 celestial sword formation. How incredible! Lin Feng could easily kill cultivators of the 5th Xian Qi layer, maybe even cultivators of the 6th Xian Qi layer. Boom! While the crowd was staring at the corpse falling from the sky, the 2 blade cultivators attacked Lin Feng. However, Lin Feng moved like the wind and disappeared from his original position. He dodged the blades, but the pressure caused by those blades still struck his body, creating a painful sensation. Those two blades cultivators didn't stop attacking, they turned around and their blades once again rushed towards Lin Feng. They had already fought so many battles throughout their life, even if Lin Feng was monstrously strong and killed their companions, they wouldn't get distracted and would continue the fight. Awoo! The howl of a wolf suddenly emerged. The one who had a wolf spirit had transformed into a wolf and threw himself towards Lin Feng. There were ominous glints twinkling in his eyes as he slashed out with his sharp claws. "Sword rearrangement!" shouted Lin Feng. His 36 swords then split into 3 separate groups of 12 swords. Each group of swords moved in the direction of the 3 cultivators. The swords emitted extremely loud buzzing sounds continuously. The blade energy collided with the swords and created a terrifying explosion in the air. The one who had the beast spirit was the most vulnerable to the sword formation. He could only use the power of his claws to individually block each sword, but blocking 12 swords wouldn't be easy. Besides, Lin Feng was controlling them with his soul. This allowed him to take advantage of every opening. Lin Feng wouldn't stop fighting until he saw his enemy's blood. At that moment, Lin Feng moved and rushed towards the one with the beast spirit while he released a terrifying deadly energy and condensed the black deadly sword in his hand. Lin Feng looked like a death god. "It's over. One of them is doomed," thought the crowd when they saw Lin Feng's deadly sword piercing through the atmosphere. "Hey woo!" The one with the beast spirit howled. His black wolf face looked hideous as he slashed out in Lin Feng's direction. It created a monstrous explosion against the deadly energy surrounding Lin Feng. "Die!" shouted Lin Feng. As his claws slashed out, the 12 sword lights pierced through the person's back and burst out through his chest, creating a rain of blood and gore. At the same time, Lin Feng didn't stop his movements and his deadly sword immediately removed the person's head. The one with the beast spirit didn't even have time to give a horrible shriek before the sword had already removed his head. "He's dead!" The crowd was trembling. Lin Feng was terrifying. He was slaughtering cultivators of the 5th Xian Qi layer like they were chickens. He calmly turned in the air. There were 2 cultivators left. Lin Feng's silhouette flickered, the 12 swords started to buzz and then immediately shot through the air in the direction of the 2 remaining cultivators. "Sword rain!" shouted Lin Feng in a deep voice. The 36 swords seemed to transform into a curtain of rain which fell onto the 2 remaining cultivators. A monstrous rain of tiny swords surrounded them in every direction. "It's over, they're dead. Lin Feng is too much for them." Many people sighed when they saw the 2 exhausted cultivators who were put into a pitiful state by Lin Feng's swords. Besides, Lin Feng was just calmly staring at them like a tiger eyeing his prey. The people of the holy courtyard of Shuiyu were gasping with amazement, but at the same time, they didn't want Lin Feng to win. Lin Feng had come here to kill them. Chapter 493, Terrifying Sword Intent. Whatever result the members of the holy courtyard were wishing for, the result of the battle couldn't be changed. The 2 cultivators of the 5th Xian Qi layer were struggling inside Lin Feng's sword formation. They couldn't escape. Those 36 swords seemed to have formed into countless tiny sword lights which fell down like rain from the sky. "You thought you were strong enough to kill me?" Lin Feng arrived in front of the sword curtain. His voice sounded ice cold. Those 5 had come to help Duan Tianlang kill Lin Feng. They had thought that it would be easy for them to kill Lin Feng, but at that moment, Lin Feng was able to crush them with ease. The 2 people imprisoned by the rain of swords looked pitiful and were deathly pale. They had come to kill Lin Feng, but he was only toying with their lives. He could kill them whenever he wanted. They wanted to say something but they didn't have time to speak and could only defend. They were scared that Lin Feng would immediately kill them if they spoke. And what was the result? Lin Feng took a step and arrived above the sword curtain. Those 2 people wouldn't be able to endure it for much longer, but Lin Feng didn't feel like wasting time anyway. His deadly sword fell from the sky, directly towards them. "Embark!" The eyes of the two cultivators turned bloodshot when they sensed Lin Feng's deadly sword, and they uttered a long cry of agony. It was of no use, they couldn't do anything while being surrounded by the sword rain. They couldn't resist against Lin Feng's deadly sword either. Boom! One of them attacked with his blade and tried to block Lin Feng's sword, but in a flash Lin Feng's sword energy pierced through the attack and pierced straight through his heart. The other cultivator yelled violently. He couldn't bear the pain anymore, he felt like he was suffocating under the pressure. He was struggling desperately to escape. Suddenly a tiny sword pierced his body, which caused him to violently convulse with pain and die under the countless tiny swords which continued to rain down on him. The cultivators had been trapped within a rain of tiny swords, so their bodies were riddled with thousands of small wounds before they died. They both died miserably. They were dead. The 5 cultivators of the 5th Xian Qi layer were all died, all of them had been killed by Lin Feng. The crowd saw Lin Feng open his hand, and the purple spirit was absorbed back into his body through his palm, along with the surplus souls. The 36 swords, the purple spirit, and the surplus souls were absorbed, leaving only the 4 dead bodies remaining. Lin Feng had returned to his normal and calm composure, but the onlookers were shocked. Lin Feng was incredible. The speed at which he had progressed on the path of cultivation was astonishing. Each time he fought, he would be much stronger than the last time. There was never a time when Lin Feng stopped growing stronger. Every time that someone came for his life, his opponents would underestimate the speed in which Lin Feng grew and would be killed because of it. Lin Feng once again proved how gifted he was when it came to cultivation. Cultivators of the 5th Xian Qi layer were overlords in the country of Shuiyu. They were considered as some of the strongest cultivators in the country, but in front of Lin Feng, they would be massacred. The most terrifying part was that Lin Feng had only broken through to the 3rd Xian Qi layer. What would he be like in the future, after having broken through to higher cultivation layers? Duan Tianlang's heart was racing. When Lin Feng glanced at him, a feeling of terror invaded his heart and he started shaking from head to toe. "Don't be scared. I am not going to kill you yet," said Lin Feng indifferently, which astonished Duan Tianlang and the crowd on the ground. What a humiliation! Lin Feng was already strong enough to humiliate Duan Tianlang. Duan Tianlang was nothing more than a buffoon when facing Lin Feng. Lin Feng could kill him whenever he wished. He had the power to toy with Duan Tianlang and decide when he would die. Duan Tianlang took a deep breath, his eyes were bloodshot, he looked like a ferocious beast. He could only wait for Lin Feng to kill him. Waiting for his own death and not knowing when it would be was a horrible feeling for Duan Tianlang. It was unbearable. He clearly knew that he was going to die, it was unavoidable, but he just didn't know how and when. The fact that he had no control and could only wait for death caused Duan Tianlang to suffer immensely. The 36 women were still fighting against Shi Huan and were able to suppress him inside the formation, but they were unable to kill him. Both sides refused to lose to the other and they were trapped in a stalemate. At that moment, Shi Huan's face was glum. He obviously saw that Lin Feng had just killed those 4 cultivators. Initially, he had hoped that the 4 cultivators would be able to kill Lin Feng and then help him to escape from the formation. He hadn't thought that Lin Feng would kill the 4 cultivators of the 5th Xian Qi layer. It was the total opposite of what he wanted. Lin Feng could join them and easily deal with him. Besides, Shi Huan was absolutely shocked by Lin Feng's terrifying battle abilities. He had only broken through to the 3rd Xian Qi layer and was able to kill 4 cultivators of the 5th Xian Qi layer single-handedly. Besides, it seemed like using a battle formation meant for 36 people by himself was an easy thing. It would require a deep understanding of formations and an extremely strong soul to accomplish such a thing. He was indeed extremely talented, and even more dangerous. Lin Feng arrived in front of the women and Shi Huan. He then looked at Shi Huan and said loudly, "You want to kill me? You want to kill everyone I brought with me? Shi Huan, you are such a stupid animal. You too weak to even escape this sword formation. How do you plan to do it from in there? You are nothing but a dog barking from inside a cage. When Shi Huan heard Lin Feng humiliating him, his facial expression looked even glummer. Lin Feng was calling him an animal, a dog barking in a cage. Shi Huan was one of the 9 snow dragon officers. He had never been humiliated in such a way. His heart was pounding. Suddenly, a sword swept past his body and blood appeared. The crowd was shocked. Lin Feng was infuriating him, so he would lose his focus in the fight against the sword formation. Shi Huan knew what Lin Feng was doing. Lin Feng was humiliating him in front of so many people to distract him. But it was very difficult for Shi Huan to remain focused. He was absolutely furious. "Lin Feng, you should die!" shouted Shi Huan furiously. A terrifying and brutal energy rushed out from his body. It was a bestial qi which shot into the sky. He then raised his fists into the air, which transformed into a pair of sharp flood dragon claws. His eyes looked cruel and sanguinary. Roar! Shi Huan's flood dragon spirit rose into the air and gave a terrifying roar. Shi Huan's claws collided with the sword qi surrounding him in an attempt to destroy the balance. At that moment, the 36 horizontal swords started to release extremely bright lights which shot toward Shi Huan, preventing him from breaking free from the sword formation. Roar! Roar! Shi Huan's flood dragon roared as the claws fearlessly slashed forwards, annihilating everything. The 36 lights that were shot forward broke one after the other. Shi Huan's hands transformed into sharp flood dragon claws again. His hands were bleeding, but he continued to attack the sword lights with his claws. Boom! A terrifying oppressive energy finally caused the women to suddenly move back. Shi Huan grew more aggressive and released a monstrous amount of qi, which surprisingly formed into what appeared to be a real flood dragon. He broke out. Shi Huan's eyes were ferocious. He had finally managed to break free from the battle formation. But at that moment, he noticed a terrifying deadly energy which caused the inner parts of his soul tremble. What a monstrous deadly energy and intent! Shi Huan raised his head and looked at the terrifying black sword. It was filled with the astonishing black deadly energy, but at the same time, that black sword contained the scorching power of the sun. That black energy was filled with sun qi. How scary! The crowd also raised their heads to see the black sword engulfed in flames. The flames were burning on the outside of the black sword. There were 2 powerful energies combined within the sword. It was astonishing. The sword was filled with powerful sword intent. Lin Feng's sword was scorching hot like the sun, but was also mixed with a dark deadly energy. As it descended from the sky, it grew more intense and its speed increased. In a flash, it arrived in front of Shi Huan. Shi Huan didn't flinch and the gigantic flood dragon formed by qi attacked Lin Feng's sword. That sword had the determination to destroy everything in its path, including the flood dragon. Shi Huan released a powerful pure qi to block that sword as he quickly retreated. However, the sword continued unhindered and blood splashed into the air. A deep wound was sliced into Shi Huan's chest, soaking his body with blood. Shi Huan was shaking as he looked at that wound. He looked extremely ferocious and glared hatefully at Lin Feng. "I, Shi Huan, swear that I will kill you, Lin Feng," said Shi Huan furiously. His body flickered as he shot into the distance, leaving a trail of blood behind as he ran away. Shi Huan, a cultivator of the 6th Xian Qi layer, was running away with his tail between his legs. Chapter 494, Destruction. Shi Huan's threat resonated through the sky of the imperial city. Lin Feng watched as he escaped into the horizon, but didn't chase him. "You just said that you would kill us all, but we are still standing here. It's you that is running away like a stray dog," said Lin Feng, whose voice echoed loudly through the sky until it reached Shi Huan, causing him to cough up blood. Lin Feng was right. A moment before, Shi Huan had said that he was going to kill everyone there, but now, he was running away like a stray dog. A majestic officer of the Snow Dragon Guards was running away from a young man who wasn't even 20 years old. Besides, Lin Feng had killed his men, 5 cultivators of the 5th Xian Qi layer. Lin Feng humiliated him, but he could do nothing to regain his prestige. Shi Huan finally disappeared out of view in the horizon. The crowd saw the 36 women's silhouettes flicker to return to join the troops. As if nothing had happened, they were like Lin Feng's shadow guards. The people below were looking up at Lin Feng and they felt a strange sensation overcome them. Shi Huan had escaped, and now what was going to happen to them? What was Lin Feng going to do to the holy courtyard? There was nobody who could stop Lin Feng and his army in the holy courtyard of Shuiyu. Lin Feng glanced at the crowd with cold and emotionless eyes while releasing a deadly qi. At that moment, it was just like Yan Yu Pingxing said, he had started walking down the path of killing, causing bloodbaths wherever he went. A person would have many choices to make throughout their lives, but one wrong choice could lead them to their death. These people had decided to join the holy courtyard of Shuiyu. They had decided on joining Duan Tianlang, therefore, they were Lin Feng's enemies. He would show no mercy to his enemies. Lin Feng remained silent while releasing an oppressive qi which almost caused the people below to have trouble breathing. Everybody was staring at Lin Feng, who said, "In the past, Duan Tianlang went to destroy the Yunhai sect in order to create the holy courtyard of Shuiyu. The holy courtyard of Shuiyu was built with the blood of the Yunhai sect. Since you have all joined the holy courtyard, you will all suffer the revenge of the Yunhai sect. A blood debt will be repaid in blood. The holy courtyard of Shuiyu must perish," said Lin Feng slowly while slightly raising his hand. "Die." When Lin Feng spoke the word, the armored cavalry started to charge, making the ground shake. They also released their deadly energy which soared into the sky. Thousands of Qi Xia troops were releasing their qi at the same time, which completely enveloped the holy courtyard of Shuiyu from every direction. The weaker students felt like the air had left their lungs and their knees were shaking. The Qi Xia troops' deadly qi was terrifying. Die. Lin Feng was really going to exterminate the holy courtyard of Shuiyu. Ah! Horrible shrieks started to fill the air from every direction. The students of the holy courtyard were panicking. The massacre was starting. The holy courtyard was supposed to be the strongest power in the country, said Lin Feng while looking at Duan Tianlang and smiling coldly. "Today, you will get to see with your own eyes how I will destroy the holy courtyard of Shuiyu. You already know that the Yunhai sect had been revived. All of your plots to annihilate the Yunhai sect, execute Uncle Lu, raise the status of the holy courtyard, and so on, are over. You can't do anything anymore. Your son died. Today you, Duan Tianlang, are going to die too," said Lin Feng, whose words were as sharp as needles. Those words resonated in Duan Tianlang's mind. Duan Tianlang had tried, by every conceivable means, to set up crafty plots and machinations to increase his own power. He had tried to kill Lin Feng and Lu Zhonglan countless times. He wanted to use them as stepping stones for the holy courtyard to grow, but in the end, all his plans fell through. Lin Feng had come to the holy courtyard of Shuiyu and was going to destroy it completely. From that day on, the holy courtyard of Shuiyu would disappear into history. What had Duan Tianlang obtained from all his plotting? His son was dead and now, Lin Feng would kill him too. The air was filled with shouts and horrible shrieks. The atmosphere was one of dread. The members of the holy courtyard of Shuiyu were terrified. Their screams and shouts echoed throughout the imperial city. In the distance, there were many people watching the massacre. Lin Feng had come all the way to the holy courtyard of Shuiyu and was now slaughtering them, unscrupulously and without mercy. "Lin Feng, you are so cruel," shouted someone at their moment of despair. Lin Feng remained emotionless and expressionless. He had to be cruel and merciless to his enemies. "Lin Feng, why kill us? We only joined the holy courtyard of Shuiyu to become stronger. Isn't this a mistake?" Someone with bloodshot eyes shouted to Lin Feng. "The Yunhai sect was destroyed and its people were butchered. Was that a mistake?" said Lin Feng while glancing coldly at the person who shouted. In this world, no one wanted to bear the responsibility of their actions, because the only thing that mattered to them was who was strong and who was weak. Duan Tianlang did that. I'm innocent. Duan Tianlang destroyed the Yunhai sect to build the holy courtyard of Shuiyu, but he didn't force you to join it. You became a student of the holy courtyard of Shuiyu and an enemy to the Yunhai sect. After using the cultivation manuals gained from destroying my Yunhai sect to cultivate and grow stronger, after knowingly benefiting from the blood of my Yunhai sect, can you still claim that you're innocent? Shouted Lin Feng furiously while releasing some deadly energy which made that person shake from head to toe. Since you joined the holy courtyard of Shuiyu, you will disappear along with it. You knowingly benefited from the blood which the holy courtyard spilt, and so the blood is also on your hands. Said Lin Feng. In a flash, an armored horse passed the person and a long spear pierced through his throat. He died with his eyes still open. Who wanted to be held responsible for their choices? When Duan Tianlang had taken people to destroy the Yunhai sect, it was common knowledge across the country, everyone knew about it. Joining the holy courtyard meant profiting from the blood of the Yunhai sect and thus, becoming its enemy. That was the choice made by every member who joined. Lin Feng, as the patriarch of the Yunhai sect, was justified in destroying the holy courtyard of Shuiyu and killing its members. The slaughter of the Yunhai sect had to be avenged. Very few people knew of responsibilities placed on Lin Feng's shoulders. Back when the Yunhai sect was being destroyed, Lin Feng's life was saved by the patriarch and elders of the sect. They sacrificed their lives to save him. Lin Feng would never forget that day and the people who died to save him. He had to kill the members of the holy courtyard to avenge all those who had died. Therefore, no matter if its members were involved in the destruction of the Yunhai sect or not, Lin Feng would still kill them. He would kill them because the Yunhai sect had saved his life and these people had willingly become enemies of the Yunhai sect. The holy courtyard of Shuiyu were his enemies and they needed to be destroyed from its roots. Lin Feng! Shouted another person. Lin Feng only saw a person on the ground rise into the air and arrive in front of him before saying, Lin Feng, do you remember me? I was a disciple of the Yunhai sect. I want to return to the Yunhai sect. Return to the Yunhai sect? Lin Feng looked at that person with a mocking grin. That person was Tu Fu, a former disciple of the Yunhai sect. Yes, Lin Feng, I am a member of the Yunhai sect, a fellow disciple, a brother. We were forced to join the holy courtyard of Shuiyu in the past. My only wish was to return to the Yunhai sect. Many people on the ground were also shouting similar things. They were calling themselves disciples of the Yunhai sect and standing in a group under Lin Feng. You guys want to return, but we don't want traitors. Said Lin Feng in a cold and detached tone. His sword then descended from the sky and then killed Tu Fu and the other disciples. He killed all of them. Since you betrayed it, how dare you call yourself a disciple of the Yunhai sect, a bunch of shameless people. Said Lin Feng while remaining expressionless. The massacre was continuing and horrible shrieks were unceasingly filling the air. Blood covered the ground of the holy courtyard of Shuiyu. The ground was soaked red. In the air, a silhouette moved without emitting a single sound. However, in a flash, Lin Feng moved too, just like the wind, and arrived in front of the escaping figure, without looking in his direction. Duan Tianlang, you want to leave already? Said Lin Feng indifferently. Duan Tianlang's face turned deathly pale. Lin Feng was toying with him. He was destroying the holy courtyard of Shuiyu and forcing him to watch. Duan Tianlang's eyes were cold. He suddenly released his dual spirits, a gigantic pitch-black sealed doors spirit and a dazzling sword spirit. However, his sealed doors spirit only had 3 doors, meaning his blood spirit was weaker than average. He formed a few symbols with his hand and Duan Tianlang's sealed doors abruptly moved towards Lin Feng as he shouted, "Seal." The 3 doors shot towards Lin Feng in an attempt to seal him. That is soul power. Lin Feng could sense the soul power being used. It seemed like the sealed door spirit could attack a person's soul. But for Lin Feng, Duan Tianlang's sealed door spirit seemed weak. Don't you think it's pointless trying to fight against me? Lin Feng then released his powerful soul, and millions of surplus souls created a wave which bombarded the sealed doors and destroyed them. Duan Tianlang shook violently and coughed up blood. Indeed, when facing Lin Feng, Duan Tianlang had absolutely no chance. Lin Feng's soul power was monstrous. He could even use his soul to directly attack the sealed doors. Chapter 495, Kill Yourself. Suddenly, Duan Tianlang's gigantic sword spirit also disappeared. He looked sad and desolate. That man, who used to have great ambitions, had grown old. "It seems like I can't escape, I'm going to die," said Duan Tianlang. He had given up. It was useless to try with his strength, he couldn't do anything anymore. Lin Feng didn't say anything. No matter what, Duan Tianlang was going to die. Lin Feng had let him live for such a long time only to let him witness the destruction of the holy courtyard of Shuiyu with his own eyes. Duan Tianlang's eyes twinkled unceasingly. He thought about killing himself, but he still had some hope. Maybe someone would still save him, maybe a strong cultivator would intervene. In the distance, many silhouettes were flickering as they approached. They could see the bloodbath at the holy courtyard of Shuiyu. Their eyes were bloodshot. These were the wealthy and noble people with influence in the imperial city. Their children were students at the holy courtyard of Shuiyu, but at that moment, Lin Feng was slaughtering them, including their children. A cultivator of the first Xian Qi layer rose into the air and arrived in front of Lin Feng and said, "Lin Feng, my clan has some students here at the holy courtyard of Shuiyu. Couldn't you be lenient and let them off? We will immediately leave." Lin Feng looked at that person and said in an indifferent tone, "Do I know you?" Lin Feng sounded calm, but his message was clear, which stupefied the cultivator. Did Lin Feng know him? What gave him the right to ask Lin Feng such a thing? "Piss off, otherwise, I will kill you too," said Lin Feng, which stupefied the cultivator. If that person didn't leave, Lin Feng would kill him as well. Sigh. The man lowered his head. His eyes were filled with hatred, but he couldn't do anything when facing Lin Feng. He was too weak. "Lin Feng, what the hell? You're too much. Do you know how many of our people are studying here and you are killing them all?" said another cultivator of the first Xian Qi layer while staring at Lin Feng. That person's eyes were filled with hatred and anger. Lin Feng took a step and released his terrifying deadly qi, which enveloped that person's body and caused him to shake. That person was terrified and his face turned deathly pale. That deadly energy was terrifying. When that person sensed that deadly energy, he regretted speaking. He had infuriated Lin Feng. What made him stupid enough to do that? But it was too late for regret. Lin Feng's deadly sword descended from the sky and the person didn't even have time to react before Lin Feng's deadly sword pierced his head. A fountain of blood immediately burst out from the hole between his brows. That move stupefied the people behind him, who immediately stopped rushing forward. They all forgot what they were going to say a moment before. They didn't dare speak with Lin Feng anymore. Lin Feng wasn't going to argue with them, only his sword would respond and solve any problems they had. "Let's go back," said another person while turning around and leaving the holy courtyard of Shuiyu. Even though they hated him, they didn't dare infuriate him anymore. If they made him angry, nobody would save them, and they didn't want to die. Other people were clenching their fists and groaning angrily. They hated Lin Feng. He was destroying the holy courtyard of Shuiyu and slaughtering their clan's younger generations. But Lin Feng wouldn't even give them a single chance of life. He was going to kill all of them. There was one person who looked particularly glum. That person was wearing blue clothes. It was precisely the strong cultivator whom Lin Feng had met in the past, the one from the Bai clan. In the past, Lin Feng had killed many people from the Bai clan, and that person in blue clothes had gone to the Celestial Academy to kill Lin Feng, but was forced to leave. Now, most of the young cultivators of the Bai clan had left the Celestial Academy and were students of the holy courtyard of Shuiyu, including his own son. Lin Feng was going to kill them all in the massacre. "Let's go and find other people who will fight against him. We can bring some of his enemies. maybe the people from the Yu clan or the Wanshou sect will help, together we can defeat him. We'll get our revenge," said the cultivator in blue clothes. The others looked particularly glum and slightly nodded in agreement. Indeed, they could find Lin Feng's enemies to help obtain revenge. The cultivator in blue clothes had been talking in a very low voice, so he was sure that Lin Feng hadn't heard him, but he had forgotten the difference in their cultivation levels. Lin Feng's hearing was well developed and his senses were acute. With Lin Feng's cultivation, it was as if the man had shouted it in Lin Feng's ears. "Revenge? When? I don't think that you'll have an opportunity," said Lin Feng indifferently, which made that cultivator in blue clothes shiver. Then, Lin Feng laughed coldly. "If you hadn't come here, I would have never remembered you. The Bai clan is still ridiculous." The middle-aged man in blue clothes was shaking as he turned his head around. He looked at Lin Feng in an evil way. "Ba Dao, where are you?" shouted Lin Feng. In a flash, a silhouette with a bronze mask rose into the air. He looked extremely brutal and violent, just like a blade. "Ba Dao, you and Mr. Hua, take 1,000 people with you and head to the Bai clan, then exterminate the entire clan," said Lin Feng indifferently. Ba Dao nodded and went to join Mr. Hua. Besides, the people who just agreed to get their revenge looked terrified. Lin Feng was going to exterminate their entire clan. How scary! The Bai clan was doomed, nothing could save them. The middle-aged man was trembling, because he spoke out, and because he had thought that Lin Feng couldn't hear him. He had delivered his clan, the Bai clan, to its death. Lin Feng would annihilate his entire bloodline. He could still remember when he had humiliated and angered Lin Feng in the past. Now Lin Feng was much stronger than in the past, but he was still foolish enough to anger him. "I wouldn't have thought that one of my old enemies would be foolish enough to come here and court death," said Lin Feng indifferently. He took a step and flickered in the air. The others around the man in blue clothes immediately backed away. Lin Feng was a grim reaper. They didn't want to infuriate him. If they did, they would soon be in death's embrace. The middle-aged man in blue clothes knew that he couldn't fight against Lin Feng, so he tried to run away, but could he escape? Lin Feng appeared with his deadly sword and immediately killed the man with no effort. Another cultivator of the Xian Qi layer was killed for acting foolishly. Lin Feng could easily kill cultivators in the early layers of the Xian Qi layer. A single movement was enough. They couldn't dodge his attacks and they couldn't escape. Lin Feng watched the corpse as it fell. He still looked emotionless. In the past, he went to the Celestial Academy to kill Lin Feng. Lin Feng hated the Bai clan. He had sworn that he would destroy them in the past, but with time, his hatred for them had been overshadowed and then he had forgotten about them. Lin Feng had a powerful enemy, the Yu clan, so he had forgotten about the Bai clan from his past. But someone from the Bai clan had actually shown up and caused trouble. Did this fool not fear death? The destruction of their clan may even cause the treatment of slaves to improve. The other people left silently. They didn't dare say a word. They didn't want to infuriate Lin Feng. He was slaughtering the younger generation, but they had to accept the humiliation or he might slaughter all the generations of their clan. They had to leave first and plot revenge second. Horrible shrieks still filled the air of the imperial city. Lin Feng looked to the holy courtyard of Shuiyu. The sun was brightly illuminating the bright red ground. It looked like a gigantic carpet of blood. Today was the holy courtyard of Shuiyu's Judgment Day. Lin Feng had annihilated the Haoyu sect and the Ice and Snow Mountain village. Now he came to exterminate the holy courtyard of Shuiyu. By taking revenge, Lin Feng had gained the hatred of a great deal of people. The gradually setting sun gave birth to rosy clouds on the horizon. The imperial city was suddenly invaded by a dreary atmosphere. Duan Tianlang was standing at the top of the cultivation tower. He was still alive. Lin Feng wasn't far from him, but he wasn't even looking at him. He only raised his head and watched the sunset. However, Duan Tianlang understood that his end was approaching. Nobody could save him. Nobody had come to fight against Lin Feng. Duan Tianlang was alone. He had been abandoned. Do you regret it? Asked Lin Feng indifferently while looking at the rosy clouds. Duan Tianlan remained silent and looked pensive for a moment, then he nodded and said, I do regret it, but he who laughs last, also laughs the longest. That person won't be you. Lin Feng. Then Lin Feng heard Duan Tianlang laugh. His laugh was both evil and hysterical. However, Lin Feng didn't pay attention to what Duan Tianlang said, he just replied, You should kill yourself. Kill yourself? Lin Feng was calmly telling a noble from the court of Shuiyu and a member of the Duan clan, to kill himself. Chapter 496, Night Activities. The glistening light of the setting sun revealed a blood-colored terrain. There was blood dripping from the top of the cultivation tower of the holy courtyard of Shuiyu. A corpse slowly fell from the air and crashed into the crimson river below with a loud splash. The sound of the body falling was quiet, but seemed to echo through the desolate silence. After that, nobody would know how Duan Tianlang died. He had acted like a coward until the end and taken his own life to avoid more suffering. The only ones who were witnesses to his death were the Qi Xie troops. They were the only ones who would know how Duan Tianlang died. On the ground, the Qi Xie troops were all staring at Duan Tianlang's corpse as it fell from the tower. He was their enemy who they hated, and now he was finally dead. Duan Tianlang had killed hundreds of thousands of their brothers to enact his plot. That debt of blood could never be repaid without his death. Duan Tianlang had finally paid the price for his actions. Everybody raised their heads and looked to Lin Feng at the top of the cultivation tower. Lin Feng hadn't disappointed them and did exactly as he promised. Duan Tianlang was dead and they had finally got their revenge. At that moment, there was almost no sound within the holy courtyard of Shuiyu because almost all of its students were dead. Apart from a few who could be hiding away in some dark corners, everyone else was dead, and it wouldn't be long until the ones hiding would be found and killed as well. Under the light of the setting sun, the red armor of the Qi Xie troops seemed at home within the sea of blood and corpses. Lin Feng glanced at the holy courtyard of Shuiyu. At that moment, he was at the highest point that overlooked the entire courtyard. Everything was visible to him. It's over, said Lin Feng in a low voice. The holy courtyard of Shuiyu had been destroyed and Duan Tianlang was already dead. Only the most influential and powerful enemies of his were still alive, the Wanshou sect and the Yu clan, but also the hidden figures who hid in the shadows of the imperial city. Lin Feng had come to the imperial city, and hadn't been swayed by his personal feelings. Those hiding in the shadows of the imperial city and those who were in control, probably didn't feel at ease with him there. The holy courtyard of Shuiyu was just the first step on his road of revenge. You have the entire night, clean everything here and remove all existence of the holy courtyard of Shuiyu. This now belongs to the Yunhai sect, said Lin Feng indifferently. His voice echoed into the distance, allowing everybody in the city to hear his words. From that day on, the holy courtyard of Shuiyu would be part of the Yunhai sect. After Lin Feng destroyed the holy courtyard of Shuiyu, he didn't return to the Yunhai mountain chain. Instead, he seized the territory of the holy courtyard of Shuiyu as part of the Yunhai sect. The Yunhai sect had now claimed a territory and become a power within the imperial city. Lin Feng's silhouette flickered as he disappeared. The setting sun slowly turned the sky red, creating a world of red which surrounded the Qi Xie troops. The dim light of the night was as desolate and dreary as water. That night was extremely calm. There wasn't a single sound in the imperial city. Its lively and bustling atmosphere of the past had disappeared. The air was cold, dreary and desolate. Sometimes a gentle breeze would pass through the lonely streets of the city, causing the atmosphere to seem even more desolate. Everybody in the city was aware that Lin Feng had come to the imperial city with his Qi Xie troops in the name of the Yunhai sect. They knew that he destroyed the holy courtyard of Shuiyu and everyone remained within their homes that night. The day had been wonderful for some people. They had placed their hopes in Lin Feng and he had kept his promise. Lin Feng had shocked a great deal of people and many had their souls shaken. Lin Feng's strength was incredible and his actions were ruthless. Rumors said that at Duan Tianlang's side, a cultivator of the 6th Xian Qi layer appeared to stop Lin Feng with 5 cultivators of the 5th Xian Qi layer. However, Lin Feng killed the 5 cultivators of the 5th Xian Qi layer and caused the cultivator of the 6th Xian Qi layer to escape after being gravely wounded. Lin Feng's name had, once again, spread across the entire country of Shuiyu. In the middle of the night, inside a vast and majestic palace in the depths of a mountain. In that palace, there was a person sitting facing a wall in meditation. That person was absolutely motionless as if he had become a statue. Step, 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 in the absolutely silent palace, came the sound of silent footsteps approaching which echoed through the silent palace. The person facing the wall remained absolutely motionless as if he hadn't heard a sound. A person appeared behind him and stood there, motionless. He didn't say a word and only waited. An eerie silence invaded the palace once again. After what seemed like a long time, the person facing the wall spoke, while remaining motionless. "How come you are here so early?" "Because these days, incredible things have happened in Shuiyu. The imperial city is undergoing some important changes," said the one patiently standing. "Remain calm," said the one sitting while facing the wall, his voice resonated in the atmosphere. "Remain calm, no matter what happens, we must always remain calm. We cannot let chaos invade our hearts. Your brother is better than you in this aspect as you have let the events of the world affect your temperament," said the one sitting. He looked extremely serene and unperturbed. "Calm." After remaining silent for a moment, the one standing repeated the word calm and nodded. It was clear that he was agitated. "Tell me, what has happened?" said the one facing the wall. "You already know what happened during the national competition," Yu Menghe appeared. "Now that the great competition is approaching, the members of the Dragon Mountain Empire have arrived with some people from Tianfeng, but Lin Feng killed some of the people from Tianfeng's side. Then, today, he invaded the holy courtyard of Shuiyu with an army and started a massacre." "He invaded the holy courtyard of Shuiyu. That's a good thing for you," said the one sitting and facing the wall, "but it also has some disadvantages." "Indeed, that's very true. The destruction of the holy courtyard of Shuiyu will give him wings, but some conflicts will arise and I fear that those conflicts will quickly become too intense, and we will be caught unprepared," sighed the one who was standing. Lin Feng had come to the imperial city which he hadn't anticipated. Lin Feng's actions were outside of his calculations. Nothing can be changed at this point. So just calmly watch as the changes take place. What you need now is time, just keep that in mind," said the one sitting and facing the wall. The young man standing nodded. He, of course, knew that he needed time. He knew that better than anyone else. There has been some agitations inside the Yu clan as well. They want to propose a marriage between Yu Tianming and Xianyi. "Xianyi," said the man said after a brief pause. His facial expression had changed for the first time. He then said, "That old man Yu Qingshan is as stubborn as before. Let them know that their proposed union has been refused. Since Xianyi adores Lin Feng, we will only consent to their union." "You're not opposed to their union?" "That's great," said the young man while smiling. Lin Feng's power of understanding is incredible and terrifying. He's not any weaker than Yu Tianming. He has incredible talent and continues to create his own good fortune. Why would I be opposed to their union?" said the one sitting with a small grin. Yu Tianming and Lin Feng's confrontation would be very interesting. "You came for my consent? Don't worry, just do what you wish. Shuiyu is yours already, what do you need to worry about? Just go and be audacious. You are very intelligent, even if your plans fail, I wouldn't say anything. The rest is for the heavens to decide," said the one facing the wall to the young man. The one sitting was confident. He had faith in the young man. He had given him control of Shuiyu. In Shuiyu, very few people knew who reigned over the country. Only those at the very core knew how the country was governed. "I understand, father. The young man slightly bowed in front of his father and then started to back away. He didn't turn around, he retreated while bowing at his father. The palace was huge. When the young man disappeared in the distance, an eerie silence invaded the mysterious palace again. Chapter 497, Lin Feng's Verdict. In the early morning, a cold wind swept across the streets of the imperial city. People who were still feeling drowsy would be woken up immediately by the cold breeze. The people who were walking past the holy courtyard of Shuiyu soon discovered that it wasn't the holy courtyard anymore. On the huge gate, there was no longer the name Holy Courtyard of Shuiyu anymore. It was now named Yun Hai Sect, which astonished everyone. The holy courtyard of Shuiyu had been destroyed and the Yun Hai sect had replaced its spot within the imperial city. Lin Feng is so aggressive. So bold, sighed the people of the city. Lin Feng had exterminated the holy courtyard of Shuiyu and had even established the Yun Hai sect within the imperial city. How aggressive! How powerful! How arrogant! Only an insane person like Lin Feng could do such an extremely audacious move. At that moment, there was no longer any blood to be seen. The grounds had been cleansed thoroughly. All the buildings, the pavilion, the lakes and rivers had been cleansed and they no longer contained any traces of blood. The entire territory seemed as if a torrential rain had swept away all traces of the massacre. The corpses which were scattered across the territory had also disappeared without a trace, as if the massacre was only a dream. Lin Feng had gathered the Qi Xia troops and his people from Yangzhou City to thoroughly cleanse any traces of the holy courtyard from existence. In one night, an army of people in the hundreds of thousands had swept the territory clean. The territory had completely changed and it looked much more magnificent than in the past. Such a task wasn't difficult at all with so many people. The Yun Hai sect now had the power to do it. After that night, apart from a few buildings from the original design, everything had been changed. The entire territory of the holy courtyard of Shuiyu was now under control of the Yun Hai sect. The ancient books, skills and techniques, as well as all of the purity stones and veins of the earth from the former holy courtyard of Shuiyu now belonged to the Yun Hai sect. At that moment, outside of the king's imperial palace, there was a myriad of people gathering. Those people were talking and discussing various events. They all looked ice-cold and were extremely upset. Those people were all the wealthy and noble cultivators from the imperial city. They were all queuing outside patiently and many had been there all night. Even though they couldn't enter the palace, they all gathered at the entrance. Besides, those people all had something in common. They were all holding bamboo slips of high quality. All those bamboo slips had the same content and purpose, even if the words used weren't identical. They were all regarding Lin Feng, who had forced his way into the imperial city without giving face to the imperial clan, including a list of all of Lin Feng's crimes. All of those bamboo slips were written using blood, to show the extremity of the contents. At that moment, inside of the palace, a group of people moved towards the huge gate. Finally, they arrived at the front of the crowd before coming to a stop. Everybody looked agitated and tense. Everyone had come to make a request. They wanted Lin Feng to be sentenced to death. A silhouette walked out from the group to the front of the crowd and said, "Give us what you want to report and we will report the details contained to the monarch." The crowd nodded and handed their bamboo slips. Those people who arrived from inside the palace were in charge of transmitting messages between the people of the city and the monarch. Outside of the palace, those who had come from the interior of the palace were smiling and collecting the bamboo slips. Those people outside of the palace had lots of power in the monarchy and they had sent their younger generations to cultivate at the holy courtyard of Shuiyu, but Lin Feng had slaughtered them, therefore they wanted Lin Feng to die. A person came out of the palace and said to the messengers, "Do not waste time, hurry and take their messages to the monarch." Then, all the messengers quickly grabbed all of the bamboo slips and immediately went back into the monarch's palace. When the crowd saw that their bamboo slips were being taken inside the monarch's palace, their eyes started twinkling with cold lights. They all looked nervous and apprehensive. Lin Feng had brought his army into the imperial city. Would the monarch be infuriated by Lin Feng's actions? Lin Feng was definitely going to die. So many people had come together to request his death. 1,000 people had brought bamboo slips and used their own blood as ink. All those messages condemned Lin Feng's behavior. "I wouldn't have thought that you would personally come here, Minister Du Gu," said a person wearing blue silken clothes to an old man who had a dignified presence. Sharp lights were flashing in the old man's eyes and he said, "If Lin Feng doesn't get the death sentence, I don't know what I'm going to do." I feel the same. Minister Du Gu shouldn't be worried. That fool is so aggressive and arrogant, it's incredible. This time, he charged into the imperial city with his army and showed no respect for the law. He even massacred the innocent students of the holy courtyard of Shui. The monarch will never forgive him, he will definitely sentence him to death," said the middle-aged man in blue clothes while smiling, to which the man from the Du Gu clan nodded. Everyone was hoping that would be the result. Lin Feng deserved to die for his crimes. If Lin Feng didn't die, they could never feel at ease again. Everybody was calmly waiting outside the palace. They were impatient to know when Lin Feng's execution would take place. They were just looking at the gigantic palace and waiting impatiently for the verdict. Even though the monarch rarely showed himself, each time he did, it was incredible and the people would always gasp with admiration when in his presence. They were convinced that this time, the monarch would agree with their request. Some time elapsed. Even though it was only a short time, the crowd outside felt like they had been waiting for an eternity. Finally, a person holding a golden parchment flew out of the monarch's palace and immediately landed in front of the crowd. The old man from the Du Gu clan took a step forwards and waved his hand. In a flash the golden parchment flew into his hand. Itching to get on with it, the old man immediately opened the golden parchment and suddenly looked astonished. "Minister Du Gu, what does it say?" asked someone moving closer to him in anticipation. "Yes, is Lin Feng sentenced to death?" The crowd was breathing faster and grew excited. Many people were gathering around the old man of the Du Gu clan. He then handed the parchment over to them and they only saw a few words written. They were all stunned when they read the message. They couldn't believe it their eyes. They blinked a few times, but those words written with delicate calligraphy never changed. On the golden parchment, there were 4 words: "Lin Feng is innocent." Lin Feng was innocent? How was that possible? How could Lin Feng be innocent? He had charged into the imperial city with an army. That made him a rebel, a traitor. Duan Tianlang was a noble of the imperial clan, had a very high status. Lin Feng was only a marquis, but Duan Tianlang must have been killed by Lin Feng. That was his second crime. For that alone, Lin Feng should be sentenced to death. Duan Tianlang created the holy courtyard of Shuiyu, and younger clan members of those wealthy and noble cultivators were all students of his, but Lin Feng wiped the holy courtyard of Shuiyu from existence. He had slaughtered all its members who were innocent. That was Lin Feng's third crime. But Lin Feng was innocent. Many people's chests were pounding violently. They were infuriated. However, the monarch didn't see it that way. The old man of the Du Gu clan turned around and said, "Sorry for causing trouble, but I want to see the monarch." "Yes, so do I." Many people were saying that they wanted to see the monarch. How could he say that Lin Feng was innocent? Denied. The monarch already knows what you all want to say. He told me to tell you that Lin Feng is the patriarch of the Yunhai sect. He came to the imperial city under that status. His army are all members of the Yunhai sect and were granted entry as individual cultivators. They are deemed sect members and not an army, so they don't count as armed rebels. All of the sect members were granted access into the imperial city by the guards, so it is not a crime. Duan Tianlang destroyed the Yunhai sect and Lin Feng witnessed the destruction of his sect. Now he enacted his revenge as the patriarch of the Yunhai sect. This it is not a crime. It is personal revenge which is justified by our law. Lin Feng and Duan Tianlang's social status have nothing to do with a blood feud between sections. As far as the students of the Holy Courtyard are concerned, they decided to join the holy courtyard of Shuiyu and thus entered knowingly into the blood feud. Lin Feng killed them because they were members of the holy courtyard of Shuiyu and were thus his enemies. He did not massacre the innocent. The destruction of the holy courtyard of Shuiyu and the revival of the Yunhai sect is justified. Lin Feng has not committed any crimes and had only settled a blood feud between the two parties. Lin Feng is therefore innocent, said the messenger of the king slowly while denying all the crimes which Lin Feng was accused of. Everybody was stunned and didn't know what to say in response. Lin Feng was innocent. Many people couldn't bear it, they were not willing to accept that verdict. Of course, Lin Feng's actions were justified as he was getting revenge. You are all justified by the law to go and confront Lin Feng to enact your revenge. Nobody will try to stop you, said the messenger indifferently. They were permitted to go and get their revenge personally. Those were the laws if this city of cultivators, but everybody waiting outside pulled a long face. Would they dare to go and personally seek out Lin Feng for their revenge? That you're tuning into the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.